much to know to know. I mean, geez.
But it used to just be sand and it was cement everywhere. So it's just like
yeah, that
crazy
pond is
for me to
amazing. Like,
see.
So they
you know what's
did a big
interesting?
planting and
At some point, for sure.
When that,
But we
since
were
that property line goes to the middle of the pond, of course, like someday the turtles are PCs, some days are not.
oh, listen.
It's interesting to
Little
like
white
hang out
flowers.
Well, it was
there
like a big
and like be perched on there.
Yeah.
Straight up seeing that. No, on the just on the line.
Oh, the fence line?
Yeah,
It
just
was
on
native,
the
but
on the
they're-
line, kind
I
of
guess they
floating,
just
kind of
wanted
anchored to the line, and
disturbance to see
because I
what
see like
would
3 little heads in a row.
there.
It's such a great spot
And
to see.
then I was excited
see
to
pond
find out
turtles.
that was like
Well, there's 2 ponds there. The little one,
Oh,
right
yeah.
on the road.
Yeah.
There's actually a good number of turtles in that
Yeah,
one too. And
the
then
European
there's
one.
pressed
Yeah,
over
it's
that
like
big
all
one that's split in half.
There's
That's
also
one
a
big
plant
one.
time that's planting
And
that's dated.
maybe it's changed, but in the past,
newspaper's a little
yeah,
different. It's
but
more,
there was a big log that was floating on the near side.
Right.
And so I always loved it because as I was coming down the hill, I'd watch them and you get to this breaking point where they all would just flee all at once. And then there was one that came around
That
just
flower.
floating on the log. Like, I'm not gonna move.
Yeah, I was just noticing the leaves
Yeah.
on the
That whole area is
where I was sitting. And then everyone was really excited about us.
Like the turtles that they're not doing,
Polio maybe? Or
that they're not
something
doing
like that.
better.
It was like
I was actually out of sight near in
we definitely
Oakley,
started to like
Three Rivers.
Yeah, Rhodia.
Okay.
It might be a Rhodia. It's a
And
Rhodia.
I mean, it's got to be. I presume it's got to be a pond turtle.
Blue, right?
Yeah,
that I
because it
saw.
was like all over the gym in
But
that area.
I don't know
Looks
what
like
else
a
would be out here.
Sliders, people that big turtles down.
That's what I was wondering if it might be that. And I'm not.
Family?
I'm one that's
Well, you'll learn something today. I'll use pictures of both and you
Come up
can
and sprout like
figure out
trees,
how I
and
do
then
them.
they die back.
Perfect. That's what I want to hear.
Do they ever flip each other over?
Because I'm really
Pond turtles, the sliders are more aggressive.
Okay.
It comes with competition with
They don't
the
look like
basking
turtles, but they're
habitat.
really
Pond
fast.
turtle
Yeah.
usually give up and
Like-
slide
like
over
turtles.
because they can.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't.
There's a little bowl
Pond
that
turtles are usually.
Oh no, it's
Yeah.
They're round bowl.
But it was really interesting because one was what we were doing the site survey.
Yeah, they
And
didn't
we
really
saw
use
down
it.
there, and
I
somebody
didn't really observe
popped
them that
in,
much because I
looked
was in
over,
that
and
area.
this
But
guy
I just
sitting there, but
picture
careless up. I'm just kind of
Yeah,
like
they're cool.
On the log with this
I think they might
kind of
be-
halfway on the log, halfway in the water. And we're like,
Or maybe they were stacked and this one fled and he tipped over. Because they'll stack sometimes.
maybe that's what happened, and we're kind of checking them out. I'm there with Deanna,
I don't
Diana
use
Benner, the
that.
watershed.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, because the intern
Doing
were
a
saying you
for a
just take
project
the
in their
picture.
care.
Someone might use it.
And
Is that how that works?
Well, it's kind of a crowdsourced thing. There's a bunch of experts that are always lurking. And they're like,
So
oh,
we took a
that's
little
good.
stick and
So you just have to
you know,
wait
take a little
around.
nudge and
No,
see if
it's
it
like
was
10
moving
minutes.
around. It
It's
started
not
moving
waiting
around.
around.
Just kind of
There's so many people that
flip a
are
little bit, and then it was off. But it seemed like
If you
maybe
can
that
look,
was it. They were asking to get
there's,
spooked.
Yeah.
One popped off because it was kind of
Cal
just like,
Flora is
man.
great
Yeah.
for that too. There's a lot of nice
They're
pictures.
they're little
Yeah.
things.
There's
Cal-
a
he
speaker.
probably
Photos.
knows Cal Photos. Sorry.
Do you know?
Cal Flora's a
Have you
nice
seen
You
one.
connect to it through CalFlora.
Yeah. Ask him. He'll know
Like
that.
close down the
Have you
shades
seen
a little
that
bit.
one?
You can-
I was on the
you're welcome
first
to sit
video.
here.
Yeah,
and
they
get
People
you
were
some
super
some
excited.
water.
No,
I mean, that looks-
Odella? Odella?
Dickless demos?
Yeah.
That's not.
But is it congestion or capitation?
Yeah.
Or were you in the North Bay and was it
No, it's like right across from Baker's Beach.
does it have a spine twining stem?
No, not so.
Well,
I mean,
so
I
there's
wasn't
almost-
all.
What's the
That's a
difference?
good one.
Up
That's
in
a good,
it, I
that's a
just-
good character.
Is
Yeah.
capital just straight stem?
No, capitatum and congestum are both straight stemmed.
That's such a bad
Capitatum comes out
camera.
earlier, congestum
It's
comes
hard
out
to like.
later.
Well,
mean,
that's
the
a
pictures
good. That's a
is
good one.
really
But at the
obvious
same time, you just
waistline.
want close in.
I mean, the pixels
Okay.
are horrible.
They'll
It's alright. I
constrict
showed him
in
good.
and then pop back out. The
Like a,
capitatum,
like a.
you won't see that waistline. The twining brigade, which you see in the North Bay, has
Spaghetti's.
it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Because I'm not sure if it's really the inflorescence stalk
It
or
thinks it knows which way is up, but it forgets.
I don't know
Wait,
what it's
what's
doing.
this one?
It's trying
Twining
to, it's
brigade.
trying to climb. It's trying to.
What's the Latin for it?
This is the one you're going to get me on because I'm so used to.
Is it Idea? Is it the Dickless demo?
No, the flower on that's.
That's the
That's like a
firecracker.
firecracker.
No, it's not that one. No, this one looks like the flower looks like capitatum. Oh, that's a gilead.
Oh, it's a gilead.
Yes, that's
Yeah, yeah.
what it is.
No,
yes.
this is gilead capitatum.
Exactly.
Oh.
Okay.
No,
That's
this
what
is
they
not.
told me.
That's not Dick Lawson.
Those were,
How do you know that?
the dunes out
I
at-
think Odella was the
do this for a
intern
living.
saying-
I know that. But what is the?
The end, those were at the end of that thing.
Oh, I should get a couple more chairs. The compact head, the size of the inflorescence with respect to the rest of it, the fact the inflorescence,
Super round.
Sorry
it's,
about
it's kind of a composite and it goes all the way around. Diclostoma, you'll notice they're all kind of opening up.
Okay. Gileads go more rounded.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Okay.
Their flowers are much smaller.
They're that color.
Hi.
From
How's it going?
blurry
Good.
distance.
Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Mary Jo.
Ray Joe. Wait, Wiley, Chris, and
Marina.
Marina.
There's
I
still
will
a
probably
few
forget
more.
all your names because
Yeah,
that's my
there's
magic.
more
I'm
Think
terrible
of
with
the
names, but
town, neighborhood, boatyard.
Just go back. Mary Jo.
Okay.
right.
Oh, wait.
We'll see if I can retain that
Yeah,
though.
you go across and then mix it
Well.
up.
Exactly.
How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Yeah.
No complaints.
That's good.
So still there.
Well, hopefully, I will not give you cause for additional complaints. So.
I might do that.
Man, it's a 6 week. It's week 6.
Yeah, week 6.
4 o'clock.
That's
Just about.
It's the full moon.
Is it? It was kind of bright last night.
20 hours experience.
Hey, thank you. I had 1 minute. It was just-
And then too, the pink stuff.
See the two.
I mean, she was just like on a floor mat or something.
I don't know.
Let's see.
Go get 2 more people coming in here.
I can wait.
You might know.
No.
Oh, we were just talking about the Western Pond Turtle at Mountain. Are you working at Mountain Lake or?
I know. I've worked there.
Okay.
Are you volunteering out there?
No, I mapped it, but
You must have blue
for the
pink.
joint venture.
Let me see, let me see.
Let me see, let me see.
Well, I mean, they're really bad.
Ah, these are so
Just-
cute.
Yeah, I thought so. So I mean, we got.
Where
like,
are
all
we
the-
here?
The sand dunes across from Baker's
Yeah,
Beach.
this
like
is
over by
Lasingia.
Ocean
There
Drive.
it is, that's the one they're trying
This
to
looks
do.
like Lasingia germorum.
Well, the green is.
Germanorum,
But
yeah.
the
What are we looking at?
The pink is different.
Oh, this is. Oh boy. It's a scorpioid sign. This is a Phacelia. And this is going to be Phacelia. I don't know it right now.
But that's its family is the Phacelia.
Yeah, the genus is Phacelia.
For the pink stuff.
For
So short.
this guy is a Phacelia, so you can see the scorpio.
Okay.
So Phacelias are known to have scorpioid cymes.
Oh, I know. Okay.
So the flowers
I get
curl
it.
around like a scorpion. So this is
Yeah.
either Boraginaceae or Hydrophyllaceae. These have highly dissected leaves like that. So this is certainly, that's a Phacelia, yeah. I don't want to, there's so many Phacelias and I haven't been to this site particularly, so I don't want to jump on a species name
Yeah.
immediately, but I would guess, I'm not going to guess because I'd get in
Okay.
trouble. That's where I'll be wrong.
So the Lasingia is not a family, it's just that one plant, right? Because I think you can only find it on the Presidio from my understanding.
Yeah, so the Lasingia, there's quite a few Lasingias
Oh, it
as
is?
a genus.
Okay.
But this one in particular is yellow flower. Most Lasingias tend to be purplish.
Okay.
This one grows in sand, which is also
Yeah.
unique. Most
I mean, it was
Lasingias
so
are
cool. It
clay,
was like just
loamy.
hanging out there in the dune.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was interesting because like further up they were also had it, but like in, I mean I didn't look at that site, but it wasn't. planting out yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because of the there was more sun, I guess, in that area.
Lysthenias?
I think they're calling it Lysingia.
Lysingia.
Whatever.
Oh.
No,
Okay.
Lysthenia is different.
Yeah, I was.
Lysthenia is goldfields.
Yeah.
Lysingea is named after a physician, Lessig, and it is a particular distinct Asteraceae. It tends to be later flowering. Goldfields, Lysthenia tend to be very early.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just realized the Ridgeway Rail was named after
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a question for you about trifolium. Just the whole genus.
Love it.
I was keying it out the other week, and there's two groups at the start of it.
Uh-huh.
There's the ones with 0 bracts or the ones with confused bracts.
Yes.
But I started going on CalFlora and looking at the different ones under each group, and there were ones that had bracts that were in the 0 bracts group. And I started going through, and like half of them had bracts.
Were they asking about Brax or involucre? Do you know the difference?
Yeah, the involucre is right beneath. I mean, involucre holds the head, but it is about specifically bracts below the involucre.
Yes. Right.
I can't remember the exact wording of it, but I started going online and I was like, none of this actually makes sense to the group that it's in, because I started looking at it and
I have to look at it again because, first of all, good question, since we have talked about CalFlora in the past. There is a great repository of images on CalFlora. They are not all peer reviewed.
yeah.
In fact, CalFlora just started doing something where you can sign up as a reviewer and actually go through. So if you say become really good at Lysingea germorum, you might go through those 50 photos of the Lysingea germorum on the website and be like, yes, 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 no, yes, 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 no. The problem is when you get to some of these difficult taxa, there's a lot of noise in there. And I don't know if you've noticed this with wildlife, if you ever look up kind of wildlife stuff on CalPhotos.
I've noticed a few off.
No, but they're usually pretty good.
I have a feeling wildlife is probably a little easier. You don't need all the diagnostics.
Maybe that's it, yeah. So take them with a grain of salt. Remember, if you see CalPhotos, which I call CalFlora because they're linked, CalFlora is linked to CalPhotos, always take it with a grain of salt. And this is where I say, like, figure out who that photographer is. If there's a photographer that has 10,000 images, like a Neil Kramer or like a Steve Cheney, whoever may be awesome, Steve Matson even. But people, you know, sometimes people throw like a handful of images up there and you can see they're kind of learning.
Yeah.
So those are worth reviewing. But if we can look at that key really quickly afterwards if you want to.
Okay.
Because trifolium is arguably the first thing I try and teach people in keying because it's so nice.
Okay.
Because it runs nicely. But there may be something funky in that key break.
Okay.
We'll read it. So.
Yeah, when we were going through it, I figured it out, but then later on I just started going through all the different species just to get a good idea of what that represents in terms of different.
Yeah.
And I was like, the stuff on CalPhotos wasn't matching up with what the key was describing exactly, but I mean that happens all the time,
It does.
where you get that like
It does.
you know 3 to 4 petals or none, and you're like, what does that mean?
Well, that's a tricky thing too with that is that sometimes people put really unique things up on CalPhotos.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is something that is a little outside of the description, so I want to post it on there.
Yeah.
And sometimes a really good thing is to read the description of the poster. So if it's a really good person, you'll find down in the thing will say, oh, I put this on here because it shows the cracks or trichomes, and these are really diagnostic.
But we'll be able to use some of that.
Versus somebody that just slaps something on there like I think it's this, I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming. I think we'll have a couple of people come in a little later. I know it's an awesome day. It's not 90 degrees.
Yep.
I appreciate you coming. I know somebody's out on medical leave, unfortunately, and somebody else had a meeting, so we have one more person on the way. But really excited to have Matthew Bettelheim. I I was recounting one of my Matthew was when Nomad Ecology was a small consulting firm, and he was doing a lot of their wildlife work, and he's been doing quite a bit of wildlife work. He'll tell you a little bit about his experience. One of my favorite aspects of him is that he writes quite a bit for Bay Nature, and if you want to see some of his articles, he's fantastic at communications, and has some fantastic articles. Actually wrote a kid's book on the Antioch Dunes area, and the Lang's Meadow Mark, which I don't want to spoil his presentations because I think
It'll be a little bit in there.
it might flow in there a little bit, but really lucky to have Matthew here with us, and I'll let you talk a little bit about your background
Okay.
to these guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So, Matthew Bettelheim, I'm a wildlife biologist, specialized in herpetology, and I really geek out on the western pond turtle. So, Leck and I were talking, trying to figure out how we could fold wildlife into restoration. And I've never actually been in charge of a restoration project, but we thought it would be interesting to give a presentation on wildlife to you guys and have you take notes. And to the guys that at the end, I'm going to have a case study where engineer is going to come to you and say, hey, I want you to design a feature that will complement this species. And then we'll have a discussion about, from what we just learned about the species, what can we do to make it the most functional habitat? Just talk about it. No right answers. Wildlife and nature in general does not have right answers, just a lot of really good guesses and cross fingers. So, if you guys are, even if you're not interested in the western pond turtle per se, and that's okay, I won't judge you. I'm pretty sure I've got most of the natural history in here. If you guys have questions, you're welcome to interrupt me. I don't want it to be just me yabbering at you. But that being said, most likely I probably have it in here. So if you're patient, we probably have it. If you have a burning question, go ahead and raise your hand. It's okay. All right, so really quick about me. Went to school at UC San Diego. Got a job working for the fishing gang in Northern California, and then relocated up to Oregon, where I worked with Fish and Wildlife for 6 months doing fisheries work and on the port. And then I came back to do environmental consulting here in California. Worked for a small firm that ended up getting absorbed by the firm that I now work for. I didn't know it at the time. That's very circular. Then I went over to Nomad, and then I came over to this firm, AECOM. AECOM was the one that bought out my original company ages later. So it's a very small world, depending on how long you stay in this community.
You said you worked at Northern Ecology too?
I did, yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other questions about what we're doing here? Just scribble notes if you guys want. Really informal. All right, so I already introduced myself. We'll go over the natural history of the turtle, then we'll do a case study, and then we'll go over solutions for restoration, and then questions or discussion. All right, so there, proof that I really geek out on turtles. That's me doing telemetry on the left, and that's me with a fistful of turtles. So that's our subject, and then the Calvin and Hobbes cartoon kick things off. When I first gave my first presentation, I made the mistake of introducing myself and saying that you guys are all here because you all love turtles, and some guy in the back raises his hand and goes, "We do?" All right, well, maybe we don't. So maybe I have to try a little harder to make you love turtles. So if that works by the end of today, then I've done my job. And that whole restoration thing's on the side. All right, so western pond turtle, scientific name, Chlamydia marmorata, also known as Actinomys marmorata, also known as Emys marmorata. It's had a very sordid past as they've described the species. But despite all the common names and the scientific names, it's a turtle, and that's what's important. It's one of the only turtles on the Pacific West, up in Oregon and Washington. There's the painted turtle. So there's only one terrestrial turtle. There's also a desert tortoise, which is inland. That's a tortoise, not a turtle. And then there are sea turtles. But that's what makes the western pond turtle unique, is that you have multitudes of turtles on the east coast So we only have one turtle, especially here in California. So it's a protected species, a species especially concerned in California, and it does not have federal listing in the feds yet, but it's a candidate for listing. So that's why perhaps the species might become more important in the coming years. If it gets listed, then additional steps will have to be taken to conserve the species.
And to swing back into Tanner really quick, remember that species of concern is also something that's protected under all those regulations. So this is
They do more protection, yeah.
Matt was very humble in his introduction that he is one of the people regionally that holds a lot of very important wildlife permits. And the reason he can show pictures of him picking them up is there aren't that many wildlife biologists I think of that have quite as many permits as you do. But anyway.
So that's the range of the turtle. It extends from just creeps into Canada and then goes all the way down into Baja, but very coastal and on the far side of the Sierras. As I don't have a map that shows the breakdown, but there's 3 species that have been described. So the western pond turtle is now subdivided. There's the Baja California turtle, there's the northwestern pond turtle, and the southwestern. And those are based on genetics and geographic isolation.
Are the ones up in the Seattle area genetically isolated from
They
the other ones?
They are geographically isolated. They were probably connected at one time. And it's a relatively young species. I mean, California's on the west coast, right? The explorers had worked their way over, so the science on the western pond turtle has really taken off in the last 10 years. So we're learning a lot about it now that for other species on the east coast, they've had years of study and research. So,
Wait, so there's the Baja, the what, and the what?
well, so the northwestern pond turtle, the southwestern pond turtle, and then here in California, those colors don't show up. Then there's the Baja, and the Baja is down in Baja, California. And that's really hard to read. I don't apologize because I didn't make the map, but you can see the distribution. Central Valley, the Coast Range, creeps up a little into the foothills, and now they're reintroducing back into Yosemite, where they probably were historically. And they
How big do they wander from home?
they can travel several miles, depending on if they're mate seeking or relocating to new habitat, if their habitat is dried up. Obviously, they can move up and down a riparian corridor pretty easily, but then crossing between watersheds. That's one of the big questions: is how do they know where to go? How do they know that when they leave this watershed, that there's another watershed on the backside, that there's water on the far side? I have no idea.
Matthew, can you go back a slide?
Yeah.
One more. In terms of distribution, these 2 areas blow my mind, right? And is that just something that's happening? I mean, this one in particular, that they would cut out that area as
That one is effectively a rain shadow. I think it's so damp and moist there that they just don't survive there along the coast. Or maybe not a rain shadow, a rain focal point. Yeah.
Green bucket.
Oh, it's like that's not the banana
Banana belt.
Or no, it's further. Or no,
Looks
it's
like
a.
Is that Humboldt? Mendon?
Just like
It's in that area.
It's just phenomenal. There's that cutout, and otherwise it's contiguous from Baja to.
Yeah.
And what's the other one?
The other one is in the Central Valley along the west side. And that's historically desert. Well, actually, I don't have a map for that, but we'll learn about that in the Antioch Dunes. Historically, there was a desert that extended all the way down the Central Valley on the west side.
Does that include Monvera Dunes and Camacho Hills? Because they have Mojave Desert plants up there, all the way up to that.
Yeah, so the dunes wrapped all the way down and connected to the Mojave at one time. And what's interesting about this is, I can't remember if this slide is in here. This is actually part of a bigger presentation that I cut in half to spare you guys. But the Tulare Lake, you guys are familiar with Tulare Lake? It was the largest lake in California, natural lake, before they drained it for cotton and safflower. Right. And so that used to be teeming with Western pondweed. Pioneer accounts of those just say it was rotten with them, and that if you walked up on it, the shoreline would just crawl away with turtles. So as soon as they drained that,
Who's the cat? Who's that? What historian?
those are just pioneer accounts. So take it with a grain of
Tulare.
salt. Tulare Lake.
Like Tulare.
Yeah.
Where was it? It's
Um,
Spanish for Tulare.
If I don't have
Just
a,
like
I
it's
might
if
not
you-
have a picture.
if
We
you-
can pull up a map.
At the
later
bottom
if
of the
you want.
grapevine, you go about, I think it's 20 miles on the left, you can see the sort of depression a little bit. You can see how the hills are about this
Next to like Lancaster?
No, the bottom, the bottom.
Visalia, south of that.
Somewhere in this.
Was it near Taylor Ranch?
Okay.
Yeah, so it's at the bottom of Taylor Ranch,
Bottom of
but then a little bit
Taylor
north.
Yeah. Actually, I think I might have the other presentation on here, so we can crack that open when we're done here too.
You can see outlines of it on a bunch of older maps.
Yeah.
You're saying it's still drawing.
It was bigger than like Tom Anderson.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it was shallow, so the Native Americans would just wade out there and they would wiggle their toes looking for turtles out there. And the women would be the foragers. They'd pick up the turtles and take them back, and then they'd prepare them and eat them.
There's a native song about that.
Oh yeah. Interesting. Okay. See, we're all learning here. And then just as a side note, Carson City, there's some question about how those turtles got there. The Native Americans and pioneers were moving them back and forth, so it's very possible that, yeah, they come in their own wrapper.
Oakland Raiders turtles.
So here you can see some of the genetics, the northern clade. So a clade is kind of a subdivision of a species. It's a genetic distinction that doesn't necessarily bear out into a species, or doesn't have enough weight yet to warrant a species description.
Can you say your first sentence again?
The clade.
It's a genetic.
It's a genetic distinction, but not a.
Doesn't keep it from being able to
Oh.
do distribution.
Right. Yeah.
Some people might call it a race.
Yeah. Race is
Some people
another
might call it a ecotype. I'm not sure. I know there's
subspecies, and like all of those kind of get muddy in there.
subspecies
How-
and varieties. I think are genetically based, but I think races, ecotypes, a lot of it's phenotypically genes showing up rather than genotypes. Expression. It's more gene expression that's occurring here rather than the actual makeup.
The genes aren't that different, but it's looking like it's
Exactly.
that can be conditions in soil or just who makes it there.
All the above. I mean,
Yes.
if they're surviving in, for example, oak trees, they seem to leach tannin into the waters, and so pond turtles that are in those kind of habitats with oaks often are red. But that's not a natural coloration. They're typically green. You've seen pictures of normal ones.
But they're more hiding
So-
on the wet areas.
So-
More camouflage, maybe.
Well, I mean, they're absorbing it. They're not. It's not a trait. It's just a distinction. But it could be that if those turtles survive, long enough into the future with that as a camouflage, that may, bear out in the future. Those, I don't know. But that kind of thing might be what would influence the trait. Some of the turtles down in the south, the San Joaquin Valley clade are lighter, kind of whiter, paler distinctions. And even the pioneers way back in the 1800s recognized that. They recognized the varietal distinctions. And they were recognizing them just because the San Joaquin Valley turtles taste better. These are
Was
the
there,
ones
was
that
there
look like
market,
this.
market hunters for turtles?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there an invasive turtle that's pushing them out of the range, or is it really just the Western pond?
We'll get to that.
There's mean turtles around.
There are mean turtles, yes.
So Tulare Lake is like right below that town.
Tulare
Rocky
Lake would
Mountain
be-
Range was right there. Oh, right over there. Oh, okay. Oh, thanks.
It was big.
Okay.
Alright.
Let's see.
So, top of the shell, the carapace. And you can see the Clemmies means turtle, marmorata is marbled. And so you can see that it's an apt name, very marbled shell. Mm-hmm. So that is the turtle dry. They look camouflage. And then the plastron is the chest. For a while, they were distinguishing different subspecies by an inguinal scoop. It was a shell that was just hanging out near the groin that the southern species had and the northern ones didn't. But it wasn't consistent. And so, but I mean, that's another example. Like, if you want to count shells and scoots, you might be able to notice anomalies like that. And then the scoot annually are like tree rings on a tree. You can count the scoots and age a turtle, and we'll look at that in a second. There's the underbelly. Yeah. Personally, I think they're beautiful.
They are beautiful.
I'm jaded. So what's interesting is sometimes you can see the scoots overlap the bony plates. And so what you're seeing here is if you pick up a turtle and look at it, sometimes you can see the ghost-like images through the scoots. And those are the plates of the shell underneath. And this actually is a good illustration showing that each one overlaps the others to protect it. They don't just lay right on top. There's staggered overlap. It took me a while to figure out what that ghost marking was, and then
So does it?
there, so you can see right there.
So is it can it move a little bit when they're swimming, like a teeny bit?
Certain turtles are hinged, so they can open and shut the shell. The western pond turtle is not. It's all fixed. So when they retreat into their shell, they just tuck it in, and then hope that whatever it is not going to be able to get inside. Alright, so the shell provides really good camouflage, and I always joke that if I didn't have a nasty habit of centering my turtles in the middle of every picture, it might be hard to actually see these. But I do. But they look like a rock underwater. The shell is a pretty good camouflage. There's one there, it's just in the middle of the picture, but put a little ripple in the water and it's...
These are the guys that will call out on their logs and line up.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the only way to see it.
Oh, wow.
And they all tumble in.
Yeah. Alright, so just to distinguish them, they have marbled yellow, olive cream, and light yellow on the neck. Same kind of marbling on the shell. The females have a blunt nose and a speckled chin. I always joke that they've got a little 5 o'clock shadow. Whereas the males have a pointed snout and then they're clean shaven. The female has a flat plastron and the male has a concave plastron.
What's the
The plastron is the belly plate.
Scoot?
The scoot are the individual.
Okay. The plastron is the number
Is
of
the
scoots.
whole shield.
Okay.
So there's a top and a bottom, and each top and bottom are made up of scoots. And the
Okay.
scoots are just the keratin that overlaps the shell that's underneath.
Okay.
So that female on the left is about 12?
Um,
Is that
probably. I wouldn't hazard a guess from that picture, but I have another one and we can count them out and we'll see. And the reason that the male has a concave plastron and the female has the flat plastron is the female needs to be able to store as many eggs as possible. And the male during copulation rests on top of her from behind, and so that little copule allows him to perch there without falling off. The female has a narrow, shorter tail, and the cloaca is positioned now. We're getting really detailed. This isn't on the text. But the male has a thicker, longer tail. So if you ever see a turtle, these are some of the things that you can look for. Obviously, you have to have it in hand to look at where the placement of the cloaca is.
But we're not really supposed to touch them, right? Because there's this species
Right.
of concern.
Yeah. No, yeah. This is just basic biology of the turtle. All right. So then, because now we're looking at the inguinal scoot. Let's see, just a little. Somebody really had something. Was really bored that day when he started counting scoots on turtles to see which one was who had what turtle, who had what shell where. And then here we have the scoot annually.
Oh, so it's an individual's mood, not
Well,
the
each year
plate.
they grow and expand outward.
But each scoot grows as the other.
Each scoot, each puzzle piece grows. I mean, they all grow together, but each one
Right.
is going to have. If they're 3 years old, they'll have to be. Each one will have 3 growth rings.
Okay, that's all you need to count.
Yeah.
You're
So you
not
just pick
adding them
whichever.
up.
No. You
Okay.
pick whichever one is the cleanest, and you count that one, and then you can pull 3 or 4 of them, count them, and then whichever one has the greatest number, that's a good guess. But you can see they get really bunched out
Tough
to the
between
outside.
6 and 7, but
Yeah.
You say for up to 16 years, do they stop growing after 16 years, or is the max age 16
The
years?
16 years is the maximum that you'll be able to count the rings. At that
Okay.
point, the shell stops growing, and you're not going to see any more growth.
But they can live for long.
They can live 50, 60 years,
Wow.
and probably longer. Yeah.
And how would you know that?
Because there are people that have recorded turtles ages ago
Oh, you
and then
just
gone back
random,
and
okay.
you can mark the shell. You take a file and you make a little notch in the shell, and then you come back later and there are distinct marking patterns that are in circulation that you can use.
Oh, wow.
What's that?
What's that?
Like whales.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the nail polish probably doesn't last.
The nail, yeah. And they can put little beads on them, but those will fall off over time.
Yeah.
Because they really do. You'll see some shells that are all beat up. So habitat here, people always think that pond turtles need a really deep pool, but I found more pond turtles in this stretch of river than I knew what to do with. I think by the end of this day, I had like 30, and there's a picture of me just biggest grin on my face and turtles everywhere. What's that?
Tell us where it's at. Or?
It's on private land. It's the Nature
Oh.
Conservancy property down in near San Ardo. San Ardo. Down Arroyo Seco River.
Like Pasadena?
Oh.
No, not that far
Oh,
south.
okay.
Along the inner west, the coast range. And so,
about this deep?
yeah, the water's super shallow, and the reason why this is so productive is that there's a lot of algal growth, and the females were crawling around eating algae so they could bulk up for egg growth.
And what is it about turtles that why you love them?
I don't know. They just do.
They're cute.
They just do their thing.
The animals are easy because they're cute.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's certain things that get you. Yeah.
I find them personal.
Oh,
So there's anyone hazard a guess what if that's a male or female?
It's a male.
It's a male. Is he shaved? He's sitting on a log in the middle of a beaver pond. So upstream, the beaver put a nice dam and blocked off the flows for him. So nice deep pools, basking habitat, ideal situation for him.
So they like the kind of blocked off water because there's more algae then? Not
Well, in this,
flowing water that's...
I mean, they want all components. And we'll go through some more, but in this case, this provides refugia. If you come up on them, you can drop down into the water immediately. And that's usually what you see when you see a pond turtle, is you see them flopping into the water and vanishing. This is a really deep pool. We didn't even try to wade out here. We did the whole survey on boats because we couldn't get out there. So that it offers protection for them. And then the logs and the root wads in the water provide habitat complexity, places to hide, places to forage, and yeah.
But the last one that you showed us didn't have those components.
No, but I'm just pointing out that you shouldn't dismiss shallow
Right.
water.
But I mean, why do you think that you found them?
Well, in this case, I think there are deep pools up and downstream, but in this case, I think the females were using this as a foraging ground, bulking up on algae. And I have a picture. I have a video too, but the videos don't work. I have a picture of them, of the female. I was able to stand right on top of her and photograph her eating algae off the rocks.
So for their egg production phase.
Right. So she's in the shallow water. Also allows them to bask, to get that energy that they'll eventually need, so they can go up on land and nest. We'll talk about that too. This is a big vernal lake up in Northern California. So you got lots of tules and open water. This is great habitat as well. Provides a lot of refuge, habitat complexity. You're gonna have a lot of small insects and fish in the root wads.
So they're omnivorous.
Yeah. This is a side pool along a creek channel that just backed up with water. Found a little pond turtle in here. Probably living in the creek, but nice warm water, lots of vegetative cover, and again, probably lots of insects and snails, tadpoles, other things for them to eat. This is an East Bay Regional Park stock pond. Doesn't look very exciting, but there's pond turtles in there. Again, the algae is a perfect place for them to hide. And then they're probably nesting up on the hillsides. And we'll talk about nesting as well.
So they're omnivores?
Yeah. I had a great video. Actually, if we get time, I can play the video of them eating a ground squirrel that fell into a pond.
Whoa, opportunity.
Yeah, just ripping out the intestines and going to town. So they'll eat anything.
Like chickens.
Yeah.
Just like chickens.
It's turning into
There's one basking next to waterfowl.
Those are too big for me.
Is the turtle looking for baby?
That's what I'm saying.
They won't, but red-eared sliders will eat ducklings and bass.
They're the three biggest in the world.
Is that another male right there?
Another male. Good, you beat me to it.
Illegal, yeah.
So in this case, this turtle is just basking at the top of the water. If for any reason there isn't basking habitat, they can just float at the top. Sometimes they'll float underneath an algal mat, so they can still get warmth, but it offers protection. In this case, the pool is deep enough that he can float out there, and he knows that any predator that comes along, he's going to see them long before, and then be able to retreat, dive into the water.
And what are the benefits of this race?
There's a slide for that.
Oh, okay.
This is on a weapon base. There's a giant piece of riprap, and the pond turtle is basking on the riprap. Male, female?
Male.
Yep. I'm pretty sure that's a male. Yeah. There's basking on immersion substrate, just a log sticking out of the water.
Female.
No.
I still think that's a
Vitamin production from the
Female's
that's a good question. I might have weighted it toward males. I don't know. Let's see. This is a Thule.
We're gonna have to report you.
That's a good climber.
Is that a rod?
That's a root wad for Thules. So they're very opportunistic. They don't need a traditional log or a rock or a shoreline. Anything will do. They've even been seen basking on the carcass of a cow floating in a pond. So,
Matt, is basking kind of helping out with
Thermoregulation.
thermoregulation, digestion.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they, so I guess the skin, they produce some sort of
They're cold-blooded.
Like we get vitamin D, they get something. That's why they do that. They get something. I had a turtle. I think they had to get out with something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then here, a bunch of turtles stacking.
Is that a female on the right? Is that a more pointed nose?
I think those are all still males.
Same.
A bunch of female on the
Well,
left.
they're all pointy. I mean, I think it's easier to tell the pointiness than
Maybe
the
they do,
chin,
but I
don't.
because they're always in the sun. So
Looks like this is a total fraternity here. I apologize.
Claw marks.
Took me years to finally be able to identify the track, but that's the track of pond turtle, and those are
That's super cool.
the claws on either end, and then the drag mark of the tail and the pointed end of the
so what?
plastron.
So there's two. What's the parallel inches of that? I mean,
I think this is the shell dragging along, and then this is the tail.
Oh, okay.
That. All right, so what do they eat? They eat tule catkin, they eat invertebrates, frog, both tadpoles, adults, juveniles, egg masses. They'll eat, what is that?
Check-ins.
Well, that's, I'm sorry, yeah, those are
Those fish things on
Those
the
look like
top
alder
right there.
catkins.
alder catkins, thank you.
Oh,
And then on the far right is dragonfly or damselfly larvae. So pretty much everything.
And what's the
And then-
top right one? Is that?
Oh, that's a really good frog egg mass.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, that was an egg.
And the
top
top
left?
left is, or
On the left, those are tule, so they'll eat the roots.
The roots are super.
Yeah.
Catkin.
Yeah.
And what's the bottom one? Truly.
Bottom left, that's a clam shrimp,
Oh, is it
Oh.
oh, that's true.
isn't it? Or maybe that's a daphnia.
It looks like
Oh.
that.
Is that from the vernal pool then?
That's from the internet.
That's a kind of always something to
I
find.
think that reminds me of Daphne.
Okay, I think it is. I'm just messing with you. So here's a female. This is the one that I was telling you about that was foraging in the creek. so oblivious to me that I was able to stand right on top of her and get both video and pictures of her eating
Okay, where's
algae.
her nose? Like,
What's that?
Where's her nose? Like,
That's
let me tell where
the
she is.
shell, and then that's
That's
her neck
okay.
pointed down, and she's eating right there.
And because she's so stripy on her head, are you going for it, or just because the shell? What do you see in this female there?
Oh, I know, because
No.
I watched her for a while, so you can't tell from that photo. But it's okay, you're off the hook on that one. In this case, I was able to witness an instance of courtship, which was pretty cool. So there's one. This is the I don't remember
Which rock it is?
Which rock is the
that's
turtle?
the male, this is the female. But there's more pictures.
Those two rocks are the
Yeah, so
turtles.
that was the female.
You can have bumpy
You guys
turtles.
laugh at me, but I know.
Wait.
This is the female right here.
And there's what?
And actually, I think this is the male floating at the surface. The perspective is off. This is like a 10-foot deep pool.
Oh, it is.
So he's at the surface and then she's at the bottom.
Matthew, do you want a pen? I do have a corner.
I don't mind getting it. So the male does a very seductive wave right arm, wave left arm, wave right arm. The female then plays really hard to get and turns and swims away. And then the male swims around, gets in front of her again, and waves. I apologize if this is doing anything for you guys. I told you turtles were my thing. I know. It's warm in here. Is it just me?
What time of year would that be?
This was in the spring, so May.
And are you expecting to see that around that time? Is that what you're
Yeah.
out there looking for?
Yeah. This is the first time I'd ever seen it, so I forgot I had a video feature on my camera, and I was just shooting pictures, and then kicked myself later that I didn't get it all on film. So there's the male swimming around to reorient himself in front of her. She swims away, so now he goes back after her. Yep. And then there's a male on a female. You can barely see the female underneath him. In this case, I came upon them. The male looked up at me
He said, I'm busy.
and then went back to his business.
And then how? I don't know if you're gonna get there, but how long is he hanging out there for?
In this case, she then looked up,
Well,
saw me and
okay,
panicked and
you were
fled.
there.
So I don't know how long copulation actually takes.
Oh really?
No.
Oh wow.
I've seen multiple bouts of it, but I haven't seen it from beginning to end, so I don't know how long the process takes.
He's got the divot in his shell on his tail.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering, like, if he's
Gets to hang out.
yeah, he's hanging out,
Yeah.
like traveling.
So you interrupted.
I did interrupt him. I'm a terrible person.
Turtles in
In the name of science. And then, in this case, this is the lake up in Northern California. We track the turtles. We collect them every year, put a telemetry unit on their back, and that way we're able to follow them to their nest without. So then it's just one disturbance of putting the telemetry unit rather than chasing them repeatedly. So in this case, I just thought it was kind of cool to show. This is what the female has to go through. She leaves the pond at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and then heads upland through tall grasses, and somehow is able to find a nesting site that's suitable. We don't know how she chooses the site or if they go back to where they were born from, but she knows where she's going, and I'll show you.
There's studies on that site for
So with the tracking device, like you're putting it
So
on.
that's the unit, the little GPS backpack that we put on their
But
back.
you would put that on like before mating season, or
No,
it's like
so
how are they gonna
we
mate
find them
with
on
that?
land, and if there's only
Oh.
1 or 2 turtles and a lot of biologists, we can follow them. But if there's lots of turtles and few biologists, then we'll collect them, put the telemetry unit on the back, put them back out in the water, and then it takes them about 2 to 5 days for them to get the courage to come back up on land again and nest. And at that time, we can now stand away at a distance with our telemetry units. And
It's
the,
on there with wax, or is it on there?
this is with a hard epoxy, we can just chip off afterwards.
Cool. So it just comes off naturally, you're saying?
No, we will remove it. So then in this case, now she's up on land and she's going to nest. This is just a check where we're trying to see where she is because she hasn't made it to a nest yet. So we'll walk away. And the secret that you guys should all know is the way to walk away from a turtle is to make the biggest fool of yourself as possible. Talk to them, stomp, and like make a scene walking away. Because if you sneak away from a turtle, they assume that you're there and they're gonna give up whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
So in this case, you have a bunch of biologists making idiots of themselves. Hi, turtle! And we stomp away through the woods. And I've left a camera in front of them just to see what they'll do. And in, I think 3 minutes, all of a sudden they're up and they're off again, heading towards where they want to nest. So, yeah.
So then you have to go back and take that thing off so that you can mate next year. 'Cause it's
Right, so ideally, I check on her and I leave and I come back in 45 minutes. And at that point, she should be building her nest. And when I know where the nest is, I put a pin flag down and then I can watch her from a distance. And as soon as she's done with the nesting process, I pick her up, take her back to camp, remove the telemetry unit, and then let her go.
And how far are the nests usually from water sites?
That's a good question. They can be anywhere from like 5 to 10 feet away from the shoreline to several hundred feet, 1,300 feet or so.
Because I found turtles way up in the mountains, away from water sites.
Yeah.
How did you get up here?
Yeah, and it could be that they do a lot of upland things, like they have a seasonal upland movement where they'll just go up and hunker down in some leaf litter and stay there. No one knows what they're doing. They're just there. Sometimes they're maybe the pond dried up, or maybe they're seeking a mate, or for some reason that habitat's not suitable anymore and they're looking for a new pond or a creek.
But in the Sierras, what do you know when it's
Up north in Washington, they've had observations of turtles underneath the ice, gathered around like a hole in the ice. So remember that when the ice freezes over, there's pockets of warm water underneath, so they don't necessarily freeze. And then they can also go down into a pond and go into a kind of estivation or a hibernation state where they just become immobile in mud.
How long do they have to I mean, how long can they stay down below the water?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, well, in a pond, they can go down and they essentially shut their body down. So in this location here up in Northern California, we've had turtles that have evaded us with the telemetry unit on. So we go back at the end of the year when the pond is dried up and dug 5-6 feet down into the mud to pull up the turtles to remove the telemetry unit before the battery dies.
And you wow.
And that turtle will live. They'll just hunker down there and shut their body down and go into a torpor.
So when you because so when you've dug it, they've been down there for how long?
They probably only been down there for a short time, like a few weeks. Yeah. So this is really rocky, vernal, rocky volcanic habitat. They can nest in sand. They can nest in rocky soil. This stuff, they keep hitting rock repeatedly, and they have to abandon their nest and come back and build a new one. You can see how rocky that is, and yet they're able to construct nests there. And in this case, the one on the right was a nesting attempt, where the female came straight up the shoreline and tried to nest and hit a rock. So we picked her up, put her back in the water, and 3 days later she came up, went all the way around the meadow, through the woods. And I know this because I was sitting in a tree blind and I could hear her. Came all the way around and circled back and came from the other side and nested 6 inches away from the first nesting attempt.
So do all the turtles have magnets like the sea turtles?
That's what we don't know. We have no clue how they're doing it.
Pheromone scent?
I don't know. I mean, we really don't know. At this site, we've had 10 years of data, and we have Head Starts programs. If you've heard about the Head Start programs at the Oakland and San Francisco zoos, that's what I'm participating in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first year where the juveniles that we've Head Started should be coming back to nest. And if that happens, then we're going to be able to see if that female goes to where her egg was collected from. And that's going to be the...
what's called
A Head Start is where you take the turtle out of the wild. We let them incubate in the nest, and then when they're about to hatch, we pull them out, remove them from the natural habitat, and then we grow them in the zoo for 1 year. And in 1 year, under grow lights and being fed supplementary food, they can grow to the same size that they would achieve in 3 to 4 years. So you're just giving them that head start. Now they're so big that bass and bullfrogs and other things that might eat them when they're super tiny, they're not bite-sized anymore. They're like the size of an Oreo cookie. They're probably about as delectable for a raccoon or a skunk.
So by going back to the age, like by size, for a certain amount of years, you could probably tell how old they are, so their size up
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for babies, you can count the rings. The rings are really clear. It's just hard to find the hatchlings.
So you put them back right in the spot where they would have.
We put them back in the water.
Oh. In their original habitat.
Yeah, so there's no maternal care. The female builds the nest. I got pictures of that, and then she leaves. The hatchlings take 80 to 90 days to incubate and then emerge, and then depending on where they are, in special climatic conditions, they will either overwinter in the nest, and so they'll hatch, but they'll stay in the nest chamber until the spring, or they will emerge in the fall, and ideally there's still water for them to then go to, and they'll stay in that habitat, eating and foraging and all that stuff. So it just depends on whether the water is available. But even then, we don't know precisely which turtles in which regions overwinter and which ones emerge.
There's not a lot of the disposition of parts of farming.
Like I said, the science is just in the last 10 years there's been a big push.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So this is the female keys on the ground to soften the soil, and then digs the entire nest chamber with her hind legs. So there's a nesting attempt there. She hit a rock. And when they're done, when she's done, so she'll dig a chamber, she'll deposit the eggs. Then when she's done, she'll take the mud and she'll move it around and make an adobe plug and camp that down into the nest. And then she'll grab vegetation with her hind legs. All of this is blind. She's doing this by feel. And just put the vegetation behind her, and then she'll do push-ups and pack it down. And so on the left, that's the plug removed, and on the right, that's the plug in place. And you can see that if you were just walking through a meadow, you wouldn't see that.
But is
In this case,
is she still there?
No, she's gone.
On the right? Okay.
They just emerge without it.
in this case, this is a depredated nest. So something came along and smelled the nest plug, pulled it up, and ate all the eggs. So you can see egg fragments there. But I found the plug laying next to it, put it back in place, and took it to photo just so you can see how well camouflaged they are.
Once they learn that trick, they're going to do that one.
Yeah. There's the plug. It's just it's adobe. So then the chamber is about the size of a light bulb. The eggs lay inside. They carefully drop the eggs into their hind legs and then place them, all blind, all by feel. It's pretty crazy. And then when we open up the
How
nest
they write
chamber,
it.
I know they didn't label them. They have their own little magic marker. So in this case, we've removed the plug. We're recording the eggs at different heights in the nest chamber so that we can put a temperature probe in there and record changes in temperature while those eggs are incubating to see what the temperature threshold is for males or females. And we found that even in the nest chamber might be this deep, and even this height has a big difference on whether or not on the temperature and whether or not it turns into a male or females.
Oh, wow.
So it's temperature dependent.
Yeah.
Is that a typical clutch size there? 4?
No. Well, yeah, like 4 to 6. They can go up to 13, and some, I think, when they're younger, like 1 or 2. A smaller turtle can carry fewer eggs. The bigger turtle can carry a larger clutch. So I think as the females mature, they're able to lay larger and larger clutches. That's an egg. They're cute, tiny. And that's a hatchling.
Wow.
Right, so predators. I told you I'd have most of these things. You've got gophers digging around on the ground. They might come into a nest chamber from underneath and eat the eggs. A little omelet. River otters will eat the turtles. Osprey. Ravens will eat the hatchlings. Coyotes, foxes, raccoons. So, on the top left is a female I found laying up in the woods. You can see the egg remains inside her body. She never made it to nest. The one on the bottom left, there's gnaw marks on her on the right side of her shell. Her leg is sticking out. Someone was chewing on her. The one in the middle has just taken a total beating from years of abuse. You can see claw marks on the one on the bottom right, and on the top is a depredated nest where somebody sucked the egg out of each, the yolk out of each egg and left it behind.
I mean, they're all dead, right? The one,
Yeah.
Maybe the one on the bottom right looks like it.
Oh no, the bottom, those two are both alive.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, look like they have a chance.
Yeah, no, they're fine. I mean, they're pretty hardy. They're miniature tanks.
Okay.
Those shells can take a really crazy beating, and they'll keep going. I found turtles with 3 legs. Someone nodded off, and they're still plugging along.
This is a good one for age, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7.
At least 7, but that one is a lot bigger than it looks, and I think that was a very mature female, so she's probably a lot older. They just bunch together at some point, and then over time, it'll rub off as they're swimming along the rocks on the bottom of the pond, and the scoop, the annually will fade.
Or like on the bottom.
Yeah, the one on the right is pretty faded. The bottom right. So other threats to the species, we've got water diversion. Every time you pull water out of a system, you're gonna drop the creek or the pond or the river. Limited resources. We've got drought. Up until this year, that was a really big issue. We've got urban sprawl, creeping up into removing wetlands and creeping up to the uplands where they would nest and take refuge during the winter. Red-eared sliders. So that's going to any pet store, or if you're old enough to remember the little turtles that they sold in pet stores that came in a little aquarium with the miniature.
And the red pink turtles.
Those two, painted turtles, red-eared sliders. And those can be distinguished. They have a red ear, and then the yellow striping. You can see the pond turtle. That's just the speckly modeling.
And so what do they outcompete? Or
So
they
sliders
eat
can
their
get to be about
eggs,
this
or-
big.
Oh.
So they're much bigger. They're more aggressive. They will outcompete western pond turtles, which are a lot more timid for basking habitat. They can have larger nest clutches, and they'll compete for food and resources. So, and then there's some worry that they could have carry disease that they could introduce to the pond turtles in their natural habitat. So I went to Stowe Lake once just for an article for Bay Nature and to see how many turtles I would find, and I think I counted somewhere in the order of 90 sliders and maybe 8 western pond turtles. So they're in the urban, metro center.
People release their
Bay Area.
pets a lot.
They do.
They release them to the net all the time, even though it's salt water, we don't know it's salt water, and we find out.
Or is it illegal for pet stores to sell those turtles now?
It's not illegal. It's only illegal for them to sell them under a certain size. But the Fish and Game Commission is trying to pass some legislation right now that will ban
What about,
sliders and bullfrogs.
what about the live turtle that we sell for food like we check out?
That is the problem. Is that they have both the pet industry and the meat industry that they have to compete with. So that makes it tricky.
Super traditional food.
Yeah.
Has there been any sort of talk about allowing people to keep western pond turtles as pets?
There are some prominent herpetologists who think that is one of the solutions, is to have people have them in captivity.
Yeah.
So they don't buy the other ones?
Yeah.
Well,
Is that
there's
why?
that, and also it would water down the market. Right now, pond turtles go for like $800 online because they're listed and you're not supposed to
yeah.
own them. So if you
So people hunt them and sell them. I mean, they hunt them down and sell them live.
yeah, they're in the pet trade, and you'll see them in pet stores every so often. So the idea is to water the market. If you legalize pot, then the price goes down. You legalize pond turtles, and the demand goes down. Roads are a big issue. People find them on roads, and well-meaning as they are, they'll pick them up, put them back on the side of the road where they started from. So they have to start and make it cross the road all over again.
Because I don't know which direction they were going.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
otherwise-
ideally the way they're facing, but sometimes people don't think about that, and they just instinctually, there's a pond over there. She was going up to nest over there. Yeah, and so then road mortality, crossing roads is a really big issue. Point in case. I've stopped 1,000 times for boots and scarves and whatever, thinking it was a dead pond turtle. So when I told my boss I wanted to stop for this dead turtle, he didn't believe me, and I was finally right.
Was it alive?
No, it was dead.
So my cousin's husband is a veterinarian, and he has rescued turtles by cars and
Then
I know sew them back
you can
up.
mend the
and
shells.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
saved them.
Now this one's long gone. So other issues are the shells are hard, so if they get inundated with water, they can explode.
You mean
And then,
like
That they will absorb water and the shell will explode. They're activated to the Mediterranean climate, but a red-eared slider has a leathery shell, so there's a little give and take in their shells. So irrigation or rising water levels that are unnatural could destroy a nest if it was too close to the water's edge.
have you seen the aftermath of the exploding?
No,
Okay.
I haven't seen it. One of the few things I haven't
Is-
seen.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of estimate on what the really rainy season for the winter is going to do? Then like maybe overwintering most of that sort of stuff.
I mean, they have to be able to tolerate some kind of
Yeah.
some rain, but generally speaking, the eggs are going to be laid right about now, and they'll incubate until August or September, so they shouldn't be exposed to too much water.
so that's spring mating, and then they're in there for 90 days, and then hatching out still, same season.
Right. So other threats: skunks, bats, raccoons, bullfrogs. Bullfrogs, people collect them for food or let them go. Bass, people like to stock ponds for fishing. Raccoons and skunks are both. They are supplemented by ourselves. Leaving our garbage out, leaving our dog food out for the dogs we can eat outside. Well, that attracts raccoons and skunks. If you live on the urban edge and there's water bodies nearby, you've now supplemented a raccoon population that's doing really well there, and then they'll wander over to the local pond and eat pond turtles that they might find. Bullfrog. I heard this photo was staged. I feel it's important to say that, but
Someone
they
fed them turtle?
Well,
just
there's
for the
that-
photo. But they do find them in the stomach contents when they dissect.
And then there's that
Bullfrogs.
Australian, that famous documentary of the bullfrog explosion in
King toads?
Australia.
Cane toad?
Yeah. Where they were just like eating anything and everything.
Yeah, and bullfrogs will eat bats, birds, rats, mice. So pond turtle is nothing to them. And then people. This is one that someone put a zip tie on it so that they drilled a hole in the shell and then put a zip tie on it so they could put it on a leash and keep it in their backyard. This is the turtle that I found on a Nextdoor Facebook site where someone was, I found a turtle in my swimming pool. So I ran over and got it, and you can't see from this picture, but the turtle was all banged up, missing digits, tail broken off, the shell been painted red. Brought it to Lindsay, they were able to rehab it. All the wounds were treatable, but at the end they almost didn't release it because of the paint on the shell. And one of the caretakers was determined to make sure it was releasable, so she sat there for an hour and buffed the shell down until all the red was gone. And whenever we've been charged by a bear, no? You can imagine it's pretty scary, right? So do you think it's scary to be charged by a pond turtle? I can't think of any reason why you would need to shoot a pond turtle.
Those are signs, they like shooting anything.
But in this case, someone used it for target practice.
And that shell's sort of red too. Would that be like near the
And that might be the
bones?
tannin, yeah. Alright, so hopefully we hopefully we learned a little bit about pond turtles. So now, here's our case study. An engineer comes to you with this brilliant design for a pond that he wants to build. It's like, we want to put this in the park. And he's come to you. So,
And he wants to have turtles in it?
yeah, we're gonna, this is our turtle pond. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
okay.
So he's coming to you. What are we gonna do to recommend, make recommendations about this beautiful pond?
Some cover.
Maybe make it round and
Deeper. Maybe have some
then
nice
bass.
logs.
Yeah, basking.
Variation.
Also
Depth.
connected to a water source so
It's
that
more
there's
plants,
water
too.
flowing through it.
And some
Slowly.
tulle along the edges.
Okay,
Where
so
is it?
Clear into it, yeah.
vegetation.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
like we need more vegetation than that, right?
Yeah.
More stacks.
Or variation in the water levels, so there could be a deep place and
Okay.
shallow place.
Right, I mean, there's a little bit of gradation, but it's pretty poor. We want some deep water and some shallow water, right? Okay, so what would the deep water provide?
Did you refuge from predators?
Cool.
Right? Oh, that's good. Thermal change, so the warm water and cold water.
You need a bunch of rocks in it so that the rocks look like the turtles.
That's
Yeah, it's
yeah,
on
we can do
camera.
that.
Some places, other places for people to hide and want to eat.
One thing I forgot to mention, so I'll give you guys a freebie, is that shallow waters are perfect. I call them incubator or nursery habitat for the hatchlings. That's where they're going to go when they emerge. It's warm, it's shallow, they blend in with the rocks and the leaves, and there's probably a lot of food just teeming at the edge. If you walk up to any pond, you'll see tadpoles there on the edge. You're not going to see them out in the open water. So shallow water would be really important. We want to have a complexity out there. All right, so we've got water depth, we've got vegetation. So
Running water, so it's not, you just, it's a little bit.
well, I mean, they can do really well in a stock pond.
What's
Stock
an
pond.
algae in that
Yeah.
stagnant water?
Yeah, I mean they are even found in sewage treatment plants down in the Central Valley.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking, I mean this actually, I hate to say it, but and they thrive in it because the water is warm. But we wouldn't want to use it as a model for a restoration project, so we would pretend I didn't say that. So vegetation, tules would be good. They can crawl through the tules underwater to make it up to land. They can bask on them. The tules provide,
They help purify the water.
yeah, they're going to filter the water. They'll provide invertebrates and places. They're going to provide fast holds for tree frogs and other amphibians to lay their eggs.
What's the deal with introducing them into new lakes? Because you were saying that they go back to the original place that they nested from. If you just bring a western pond turtle to a new lake, will it just figure out where it wants to go next?
That's a great question. So the turtles in Mountain Lake that you were talking about are all from the other lake that I have a lot of my photos from where we were collecting the turtles. So they're transporting those turtles. They'll one of two scenarios will happen. They were either removed from the nest immediately after they were hatched and incubated and then reared in captivity. So in captivity is the zoo. Or they were incubated in situ, in the ground, and then we came out days before they were supposed to hatch, opened the nest up, removed them, and then raised them in captivity. So seems like a nuanced difference, but there's 80 days of them exposed to the sites, the environments there that may imprint on them. We don't know why.
Even though they're inside the egg.
I have no idea. I'm not going to say what does or does not influence them, but somehow they know to go back. So I don't think the turtles that we removed from Lake County and brought to Mountain Lake are going to try to get back to Lake County, but they're now starting with a clean slate. They may be imprinted on somewhere and have to rewire themselves to calibrate to the new pond. Obviously, they need to be able to relocate because if a pond dries up, evolutionary speaking, they need to be able to reset the clock and go over to that pond or that creek and recolonize. That's an important behavior. But Mountain Lake will be an interesting experiment. They've introduced several.
It's like 2 years now.
Yeah. So those are all head starts, and they're going to be monitoring them to see where they nest and what kind of activity they do out there.
It's funny you named the same program as the daycare. Let's start.
I know.
Famous early childhood program.
Are there any longer term kind of telemetry studies? I would imagine some of those have gotten smaller too, where you can track them. Are those ever thought of as a hindrance to them?
The telemetry units?
Yeah, the backpack.
They're big, but I mean the turtles do really well. They're able to, I mean, we put them on for as little time as possible. They're probably wearing it for a week tops.
Oh, okay.
We try to recover those because they're expensive. They're several $100s each. We don't want to burden them with something unnecessarily. So the idea is to recover them. When Dr. Guy said to dig them up at the end of the summer, that was because someone was sloppy and let the turtle go. They had too many turtles that they were watching and they got away. You don't want that to happen. Yeah.
Have you heard anything about people hacking the telemetry units of other wildlife and then hunting them and finding them? There's recently an article about that.
What kind of animal
People are
were
awesome.
they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Cats.
how
Seriously.
They
serious.
were cats, because they had the collars, they were the collars.
What
Yeah.
kind of animals
Things they
were
were
they?
wild cats.
Like,
What
Sort of
kind of-
cougars.
So what about predators? What could we do? Predators and non-native species. What can we do as part of this restoration program to control those?
Well, we
Well,
want places for
Signs
them to hide.
that say,
Yeah,
So, you know, if there's a lot of vegetation,
Trap some
rocks
of
on the
those
bottom,
skunks
you
in
have
there.
something that's
Yeah. So
Hide-
big
the
rocks in the
hiding-
bottom, big
hiding
logs
places.
that you could collect from another site and just dump in there rather than burn in or something. You can also do artificial basking platforms. You could anchor into the middle of the pond so that there's a perpetual place. And if you have something like that, then you can do a monitoring program where you can now go out, the basking habitat is fixed, and you can go out on a regular basis and count the turtles to see if your restoration program is effective. So let's say this is near an urban area.
so signs that say please don't deposit your pets.
Okay.
Trilingual. There's a lot of
Introducing
Spanish
like
and Chinese like to
policy.
dump their turtles.
introducing other vegetation to the area away from the pond. Maybe some forest or grassland. I don't. What do they like to nest in? Is that
So they like to
organic?
nest in low-lying grasses. So you'd want some open bare ground. Tree cover provides too much shade to they don't get the thermoregulatory balance that they need.
The sites of the pond would need to be different unless they didn't climb up that kind of slope very high.
They can actually. I've seen them climb like a tree branch, like not like trunk, tree branch in the water, and they'll spider their way up and just hang like a spider. I've tried to get a picture of that, and I've never been able to. But they're literally just suspended in this complex branch. They're really good climbers.
So you
They
can
can
climb
climb-
on little twigs or something.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So a shoreline like that would be fine. So other things we could do, like let's say this is near an urban area, signage would be good. Talking to the neighbors and trying to get them invested in this restoration project.
Yeah.
You know what? This is your pond.
Excited about it.
If you can keep dogs out of here, if you could, keep an eye out. If you see people with their pet turtle, talk to them about not releasing it.
Create policy.
Yeah. They also at Mountain Lake they've got a turtle return box where you can put unwanted pets in this. It's kind of like the deposit box at the library, and then someone
So
checks
they
it.
don't release it.
Exactly. And then they'll check it on a regular basis, and they'll take it to a rescue center, or if they have to dispose of it, they'll dispose of it. But
Is that working? Is that?
they've gotten turtles and fish and stuff in there, so yeah, it works. I mean, people just don't want it anymore, so they feel like they can make it someone else's problem, put it in a box, and feel good about it.
Yeah. They dump them in there a lot, which
Yeah.
is saltwater. They dump them in the ponds at Oak Museum a lot.
Yeah.
There's a big variety of turtles there. People dump diseased animals a lot
Mhm.
also. But ponds always have an issue there.
Yeah. So another thing you might want to do is if you have nesting habitat, like an open grassland, you want to make sure that there's connectivity between the pond and that, and if there's any trails or roads, that those are on the far side, so that you don't have to expose the turtle, force them to cross a road or a path where there's frequent pedestrian access.
Does it work to sit that pond a little lower and have a little more upland and slope to get upland? Because here it just looks like a flat.
Complexity, I think, is the most important key. You can have steep slopes, and I've seen them, banked up on a steep slope. And then if you have nice shallow flats, they'll cluster on those too.
Is there a way to connect it to some sort of other waterway? Possibly doing
In this fictitious scenario, you probably could, or just making sure that there's, a
Do they
green
need
belt
that, though?
between that. Well, I think what you don't want is you don't want a house in between that and the waterway.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was a closed system and they just are stuck in that pond and there's no other way around it,
Yeah.
it's probably a population sink. They're not going to be able to contribute to the meta population, but you're at least sustaining them in that one place. But if there's a creek, you know, off in the distance, maybe making sure that the trail goes around the far side of the pond so that there's connectivity, or you could do I think they're looking at turtle undercrossings along well-traveled roads to make sure that there's a way to funnel them underneath the roadway so they don't get trapped.
You might want to have a viewing platform if this is meant for, you know, the neighbors to come and look at them, so that they're not walking across the grass lines being
Yeah.
They can just look down.
Again, signage is good. Like, you know,
Yeah.
if you find a turtle, please leave it alone. Yeah.
There was a recent East Bay Park District survey, it took place in Marin. So it was Marin County Parks as well as San Mateo County Parks. And it was really interesting when they did these exit surveys of people who use the park and grab them on their way out. And they were very pleasantly surprised by how many people actually read and interpreted something. And it was heartwarming to know that folks were reading those. One of the interesting feedback moments was that these signs were not in my native tongue. And we continue to have predominantly English signs in English where a lot of our park goers, especially in specific areas, are certainly not, English is not their first language.
There's
So.
going to be a talk about that tomorrow.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if it's the same group of research, but
Where was
it's
the site that they studied?
this was there's a link to it on the Open Space Council. It was all about environmental justice in parks, and they were kind of doing an assessment. There's a professor in SF State named Dr. Nina Roberts, and she did it with someone else, and they were basically assessing what kind of groups get out to parks, what their experience is.
There's been a lot of work done at the national parks looking at it too, and at a lot of museums even too. And they find that intergenerations use the parks. A lot of Latinos use parks for all kinds of family celebrations, not just birthdays, but a lot. Traditional cultures use the parks as almost this multi-generational thing. And a lot of Chinese also, because it's free. Anything that's free is like right in this big thing.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I would say that we're brought up with a certain concept of parks based on our parents, based on our socioeconomic status. They're supposed to be wide open green spaces that you go hiking in, and for a lot of cultures, a park has a much different context, and we're just starting to figure that out. And there are spaces that allow for that more and more now, like Lake Chabelle is a fantastic place where it really has a lot of multi-use. There's some active areas, and then some fantastic areas for large gatherings and so on. And versus you go out to say a Sibley, and it's a very different kind of experience. And I know Sibley's a preserve, so it's not quite apples and apples, but
Fishing is huge.
yes.
And the signs, like, the signs are pictures usually reveal what to take, what not to take, what to fish.
On this topic, I'm wondering, I always wonder about ponds. A lot of times I hear overlap with CTS, California Tiger Salamander, and RLF, Red-Legged Frogs. Is it incompatible? I know there's hydro period issues, but is one going to predate? Once your turtles get big enough, are they going to predate?
I mean, they've been cohabitating for hundreds and thousands of years, so
Okay.
I think, and obviously this was a very closed scenario, right? We're not thinking about all the fish and frogs and all the other inhabitants that might be in a pond, but pond turtles need something to eat, so they're going to keep getting eggs and tadpoles, and it's a part of a healthy ecosystem. I don't think a pond turtle is going to eat enough egg masses to demolish a red-legged frog population. They cohabitate, and I think that's good to know. And obviously, if this engineer came to you and said, "We're designing this for this," and you happen to be in an area where there's red-legged frog and tiger salamander, then you'd want to make sure that your your restoration program addresses other species as well. And this is just meant to be kind of a fun way of like learning about a species and realizing that there's a lot of natural history components that you can apply toward design to make sure that your restoration project is successful and provides utility for that species, right? So, sure, a pond turtle could live in there, but would it be a healthy population? It might not. Might it be subject to a lot of predation? It might. It's super shallow, and a coyote or a fox could just wade in there and pick them off. So you start adding complexity, you start adding hiding spots, vegetation, you make it a lot more functional. And the same thing goes for tiger salamander, red-legged frog.
If this had bullfrogs, would that be a no-go for you?
The presence of bullfrogs does not preclude other species from occurring. It just hampers it a lot. Now, I've been, back when I did Fish and Game, we did surveys up in like Tehama County where you go out at night doing spotlight surveys. If you shine a spotlight on a pond, you get the reflection off the eye shine. So we would count eye shine to do assessments of the number of frogs out there. We're looking for red-legged frogs, but what we found were thousands of bullfrogs.
Are they not native to this
They're
area?
not native at all. No, they're from the south. So
Oh.
I literally found bullfrogs as big as my face and caught them in nets, and the net is hopping away. So
How old
they-
a frog is that then?
that was probably a very mature adult, but they had just taken over this pond. In that case, yes, you're not going to have much surviving in there, but just people will often say, "Oh, there's bullfrogs here, so there's nothing else." That's not the
How
case.
come you don't hunt them with their food? Why not?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So what we
Yeah,
need
so
to do
what-
is start a program where we tell everyone that eating bullfrogs results in virility, and then
Oh, yeah, that-
people will go out and
yeah.
collect them and eat
Yeah,
them.
you do it.
Right?
That's all.
We just need to reverse engineer the process.
Well, what would you do?
Need some
What
fake
did you
news
end up
on it.
doing with those bull?
In that case, they outnumbered us. I didn't even get near them. What
I
can
mean,
you
they
do?
would
Nothing.
continue to outnumber,
Yeah.
and
So,
I mean, is it?
The way to eradicate bullfrogs is to shoot them, to draw it down the pond. You'd want to put a net or a fence around the entire pond, draw it down, and then you'd want to go through and gig or shoot all the adults. You're not.
Did you have to do that?
BB gun, whatever.
Could
Oh.
use
You need a permit to do it.
Is that something you had to do in your career?
I haven't had to do it, but it's on my permit. I could if I needed
Oh
to.
my
Oh,
gosh.
Carrabba,
Yeah,
to
could you
suffocate
just
them?
use soap plant to do
You
it?
suffocate them
What
with
the Native Americans used to do with
Or Aeschylus?
Just put the
Question.
saponins in it and make them not be able to metabolize
But
oxygen.
I would assume that's only with fish, not with humans.
So then the other thing you would do is that would kill the adults, but there's still going to be adults that are up in the surrounding area, or they're going to be down in the mud, and you might, you're going to miss some. So then when that pond fills up again, then you're going to have a rigorous program of people going out there doing the same kind of thing, but then also collecting egg masses, right? You want to limit the reproductive output.
It's as bad as weeding.
It's terrible. It's going to take, it'll take probably 10 years to fully eradicate bullfrogs, and that's
People are so
assuming that
lazy.
you're not in a more complex system where there's ponds and creeks all over where they're just going to be colonized.
It's like getting rid of room.
So I mean, are there sites where that you know that that's happening and like serious?
Not around here. I mean, there are bullfrogs in the area. We find them
Right.
regularly, but up in Tehama County, those places were just rotten with them. And I'm sure that we're not letting a frog or other species there just because they dominated the entire
Yeah.
system. Hopefully, we don't have that down here.
I believe I heard of a program where there was a large-scale project on the Sierra and Yellow-legged, or Mountain Yellow-legged. I think it may have been split, but they were doing I think they were zapping them with basically a taser.
Okay.
And trying to eradicate him because it had the Sierra and Yellow-legged frog had just such a small range, and it really got to the point where people were out there zapping, and I forget who it was. It was obviously State Fish and Wildlife was involved, as well as some other agencies. But yeah, I think you look at that functional range where species can
is pushing, or it just barely survives. And I feel like those are the moments where you can start to attack something.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when you think about weeds and elevation. A lot of weeds, a lot of the invasives we care about fall back, they become less competitive at a higher elevation. And so you think about if I really want to truly learn about this sensitivity of this plant, do it at the edge of its functional range, the edge of where that highest range or that most inland campus, and see what you can do there, and then start moving backwards in. And I wonder if that's the same thing they were doing with the Mount Yellow, where they were, because it was up there at very high elevations, and I don't know if bullfrogs have elevational limits or
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
at some point.
They can't tolerate a certain. I mean, they're used to the southern
Right.
Cold.
climate, so they're going to have limitations on. Yeah.
So-
It's the same with spotted owl and what's the- I'm blanking. The barred owl. Thank you. One of the ideas to prevent the barred owls from predating spotted owls, and they're slowly moving their way south. And one of the ideas is that they could create giant swaths of land where they would just cut down trees and prevent them from being able to jump.
Yeah, I heard about that.
But to do that would be a major. I mean, it sounds terrible, right? Just throw cutting land to stop the movement of a bird where you have giant belts across the state.
How wide a band are you talking about?
I'm not sure.
10 miles?
But it would be noticeable if you're trying to keep
Yeah.
wildlife from jumping between it. I mean,
Space.
this is, yeah. So, I
It's
think
not
what's-
wide enough, it's basically like just great hunting,
yeah.
mouse town.
I think what the takeaway here is I think it's easier to prevent introductions in the first place by educating people and making them part of the process than it is to try to remove something later. So having that signage, engaging the public, making them invested in the project because it's in their backyard, those are really good steps. They're not infallible, but they're I think a part of restoration is keeping the area intact.
And we've had that, that's been a theme, definitely, right? With bait in and the early detection with the weeds and, it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Should we do the next one since we're down to about 40 minutes?
Yeah. So we'll just look at these really quick, where turtles are found. So I had a few kind of cool graphics that I scrounged. So we have floating aquatic vegetation, submerged vegetation, we have bare ground, we have vegetative cover for refugia. So I think we hit on all these: foraging, hiding habitat for adults and juveniles, overwintering habitat, basking habitat, nesting habitat, estimation habitat. So I think we hit it all. And then, so just really quick, I think we covered a lot of these. Creating offshore emergent features where they can bask, creating artificial basking platforms, deep water for adults and refugia, shallow water for nursery grounds, nesting habitat, south and west facing slopes, sparse vegetation, good distance from the water's edge, and free from artificial irrigation. So somebody's lawn or a golf course is not going to be suitable habitat.
I might have missed this at the beginning. Do certain invasive plants hinder the turtles, or are they sensitive to native plants?
No, I mean like bindweed or something like that. What's that? The orange daughter. You know, that kind of stuff that might impede them, but they really are tanks. They can just force their way through anything.
And they don't depend on any certain plants.
No, they're omnivorous. They'll eat just about anything they can. I don't know if there's any plants that are detrimental to them.
Even like I'm thinking of the work at PUC with dispersal obstruction for CTS and RLF. Dense stands of thistle are something to worry about. I think something like a dense stand of thistle would deter these guys, or not
I
really?
suppose it's
Or they,
possible.
or they can't hide from predators like a buoy or something because there's too much salinity.
Salinity would be an issue. I've
Yeah.
actually always wanted to look at what the salinity tolerance is because they can move into estuarine habitats to a
Yeah, I
certain
was doing a
degree.
case study of Pescadero, and there's like so many different salinity levels in all the different ponds.
Yeah. So urban predator management, make sure you're not supplementing wildlife and making it easier for them to attracting them. Preventing the introduction or removing non-natives and exotics. Educational signage. And then there's the ideal turtle pond. Hopefully this will be designed in the end. So, I think we hit it all. Good job. And a little Calvin Hobbes cartoon to close us out. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well,
We never read that one.
Oh no.
Sorry, it's a little tricky sometimes.
I'm terrible
You
with
gotta go back to
I'm terrible with laptops. That's why I asked you if you had one, because I don't carry one. Oh, it's gotta.
and then you get the slideshow. Yeah, that's fine.
There you go. This is what we hope we don't have in our future. A generation unaware of what it's is.
Now, what's the largest body of water that you've seen?
I mean, they're in the Sacramento River, San Joaquin River. Big flowing rivers. I mean, they'll be in the sloughs and the side channels. They'll probably get washed down into the main channel. They probably don't love the main bow wag of the stream. Too much current, not enough food.
Don't know about brackish water, like from the river or something.
That brackish water, I'm curious about. I want to look at data and see where they show up, and if there's got to be a salinity gradient that would preclude them from going further down. They've been found on what's the island out in the bay? There's a
Bacon.
Not Angel.
Yeah, there's several, but they've been found on one of the islands in the bay, and the supposition is that they were washed downstream during a storm event because they shouldn't be out in the bay. They were on
Like Angel Island, or are we talking like
no,
up
it's a
in
smaller one.
Mirror.
off the Antioch Dunes, those little islands.
Yeah, like
No,
Bacon
it's
Island.
further down.
Mirror
It's I don't remember exactly where.
But yeah, I wonder, like, with all the rains, like, if they're, like, near the
It's
mouth
usually
of the
flooded.
river, if they're getting flooded out
Yeah,
to the
it-
ocean.
After major storm events,
Yeah.
a lot of people find pond turtles on the beach,
Yeah.
and then there's always a big influx of turtles because of that. And the hard part is rehoming them, because the Fish and Game's responsibility is to send them back to the micro watershed they came from. But if it came out of a giant river system and they all get flushed down at once, then they're kind of at their wits' end about what to do with the turtles.
So if you see a turtle on the beach, you should.
If it's a pond turtle, it doesn't belong there. It should be brought to a rescue center, but unfortunately, I don't know if they're going to be able to rehome it.
So you were counting what, since how we know what the numbers are?
Of pond turtles? No. I know that on either end of the range, the numbers are depleting just because of in Southern California, all the urban growth and the waterways dried up, and up north. I don't know if there's a good reason why they're diminishing up north. There was an upper respiratory disease that took them out down to like in the 20s and 30s, and they have now reestablished that population up into several hundreds to thousands.
And let's just a heads up, Matthew's gonna have to go a lot quicker through this one, so
Yeah.
we will mellow out the questions and let him cruise, so just so we can get through the whole answer.
This is this is a shorter one. I put a lot of history in here, and we can burn through it. I wasn't gonna bore you with all of it.
The history's good.
No, history's fun. I love history, so we'll just do like the highlight reel. So in this case, we're gonna talk about the Antioch Dunes. Have some people been out there? You know where it is? Okay. So there's a little placement map at the top there. It's up near Antioch, Oakley area. It's a tiny little remnant dune. We'll hit the history of how it came to be, but it's a wildlife refuge. It's separated into two parcels, and it's surrounded on all sides, except for the water side, by industry or roads. So you've got the Lang's meadowlark butterfly, you've got the contracostal wallflower, evening primrose. All of them are threatened by extinction or habitat loss. And all told, all these species are living on 55 acres of land. So, pretty dismal.
Covered with invasive species.
Covered with what's that?
Covered with invasive species.
Yeah. Did you?
And I don't want to burn it here, but first ever National Wildlife Refuge created for bugs.
Oh, butterflies.
Yeah. Charismatic microfauna.
Yeah.
And the wallflower is Erismum what?
Capitatum,
Capitatum
Augustum.
Augustum. Okay. It smells good.
Gustifol.
Alright, so what we have here is the sands originate from the Sierras. They washed down the two major rivers, the San Joaquin and the Sacramento. And this is the first place where the river settles out and the sands can fall out of the water column. And then you've got the winds blowing in from the west. They blow it up onto the dunes. So we're not going to go into the history or natural history of dune formation, but this is the unique spot, and that's why that's where all these sands originate from. So 5,000, 8,000 years ago, the river, this dune system connected from the San Joaquin River, circled around Mount Diablo, went down the San Joaquin Valley, and connected to the Mojave Desert. So you had a giant dune band, and you'll see a trend of different species that carry all the way down there. You've got legless lizards and horned lizards and all sorts of different plants. And some of this is broken up, and there's little pockets. And obviously the Central Valley has changed considerably over the years. But it's interesting to know that connectivity once existed all the way to the Mojave, and now it's completely isolated. So the Antioch dunes are a tiny little microcosm there now. Oh, formatting. I don't know what happened there. Pardon me. So one of the problems is it's really hard to take a charismatic photo of the dunes because they're not charismatic anymore. They don't look nice because they've been mined for sand. They look like a vacant lot. So this is what we're supposed to care about, right? It's really hard to sell this to people. So the natural native plants are the wallflowers. There's naked stem buckwheat, the evening primrose. You have coast live oak woodland, telegraph wheat, California poppy, deerweed, matchweed, gum plant, California croton. But it looks pretty weedy, right? I mean, if you went out there, it'd be a hard sell to say this is a really important place to protect unless you knew what you were looking for. So we're going to burn through this. This is the history of the dunes. This is how the dunes came to be and how they got destroyed. So 140,000 years ago, we've got sand dune formation. Those dunes become established, and they are 180 feet tall and extend 800 feet inland from the river's edge. In 1772, the first explorers come and stop on the dunes and describe them, mention them. So they describe oak woodland, deer, antelope, tule elk, and beaver. There's Native American encampments there. 1776, the Deanne's expedition. And then if you guys know local history, John Marr shows up in 1838 with his degree as a doctor and starts settling Contra Costa County, what will become Contra Costa County. So then in 1849, the Smith brothers show up and establish Smith's Landing, which later becomes Antioch. 1852, got sand sitting there. So they turn it, they decide to build a brick factory there and start mining the sand. And then 1853, there's a dairy, a piggery, a sheepfold, stores, and with this habitation, you begin to see wild oat, fillory, and other invasive species that are showing up. So that's pretty early in California's history. You've got non-native weeds showing up. 1860s, they established a vineyard on the site. You can still see the plants there today. They're still there. 69, you've got botanists exploring the area from the California Academy of Sciences. They recognize this as a unique spot. So despite everything that's going on out there, they begin botanizing, and then you've got entomologists that go out and start collecting insects. By 1889, you've got more brickyards, and then the Contra Costa wallflowers described. And then in 1900, they've got railroad track that's laid in. And that makes it a lot easier to pull bricks out. And brick means sand, so now the sand depletion is getting magnified. And then they're cutting down all the woodland for firewood. This little shows up. And then 1903, Wilbur Avenue is built, which is additional access to the dune. So the more access there is to this area, the more activity we begin to see. So 1903, they began building major buildings in the city from the sand mined from there. And there's a guy who has a map of San Francisco and can tell you all the places where Antioch sand, the brick is.
They're very distinctive.
They are.
The bricks are not terracotta. They're used in sort of the same way that you make concrete. The binder is lined. They're not baked.
There's a whole subculture about bricks.
So the brick thing, they're very,
Wow.
and there's people who are collectors of bricks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really?
Just knowing that makes me feel good that all I like is turtles. Because this is not a brick, right?
It's kind of interesting.
No, it is interesting. So now we've got 1904. There's more companies mining brick, and this is kind of a cool postcard showing the height of the dune. There's a factory there. Those are train cars in the mid ground.
That's a great
The
image.
railroad
Where's
track
that
in the
from?
foreground. This is the brickyard. This is Antioch Dunes.
No, the image. Where's the image from?
Where did I get it from?
Yeah.
It's a postcard.
It's a
It's
historic
a-
postcard.
yeah.
That's great.
And then they actually built a tunnel through the dunes to connect it to the beach so that they could establish a port there. So now you've got a lot of people pulling sand out of that area. And then you have the 1906 earthquake. History has a way of
We need
shaping.
more bricks.
Yeah, we need more bricks. We have to rebuild the entire city.
The bricks
In an earthquake
collapse.
zone, let's build more.
Bricks,
Buildings out of bricks.
I didn't say it was a good decision. I just said that's what.
Okay, we need more fur in Redwood too.
Yes. So 1909, PG&E, or the Great Western Power Company, builds transmission towers. Those towers are still there today. And we've got more brick companies.
With the mustard building.
You said the PG&E building is made from the.
No, the
okay.
tower. So you can see the tower in the background. If you go
yes.
out there today, you can still see the towers. That just gives a sense of scale. That's a giant transmission tower, and that's the towers of Dune. And that's them actively mining it. It was also known as Antioch Beach. People would go out there and recreate, park, beach, go there to picnic. And then the Stan family in 1930 buys portions of the dune, and now entomologists from the Cal Academy of Sciences and the UC system are now describing new types of plants and invertebrates out there. So all this is important because the more data they're collecting about this unique area, they're realizing that there's unique species here found nowhere else. And that it's physically, geographically isolated. There's no connectivity to any other sandy habitat. So these all become unique species.
Timing wise, it's kind of interesting. Well before any ESA Endangered Species Act.
So eating primrose in 36, Lang's metalmark butterfly in 39. They're recognizing that these are all unique species that aren't found anywhere else. Let's see, is that important? No, let's get that one. Fiberboard company. Oh, I guess it's fun to know. There was a bar out there, so you put a bar out there, more people show up. Fiberboard company. They're cutting everything down. Antioch Dunes and New Primrose described in 49. There's another mill built in the 50s. Sewage treatment plant. Who doesn't love that, right?
There's still a sheetrock plant there.
Yeah,
The dust blows over
The
the
gypsum
site.
plant,
Yeah,
yeah.
gypsum plant.
that's one of the problems. So we're now like hemming in these two parcels of land and then splitting them in half. Well, hemming in the parcel of land and then splitting it into two. Yeah. Now this is unique. Time magazine in 1955, they did a full feature spread of where it showed all the unique fauna and flora of the dunes.
That is so cool.
And this kind of brought the dunes into the limelight. Before that, it was academics or just the locals recreating there. And now it's in Time magazine. So now in 1976, listed as a federally endangered species. And then they just proposed in 77 making a critical habitat.
Is this the state of California or federal at this point?
It's federal.
It's federal.
And then the Mesas of the opposite. So now we have multiple species being described as unique and warranting protection out there. 78, the listings become formal. 79, they show up on postage stamps. So it's kind of easy. Like the social aspects of this are just as fascinating. Time magazine, the Cal Academy. These are all kind of social components that are drawing attention to this unique habitat. And then you put them on postage stamps, and now people are seeing them in the mail every day. People start sending mail to their congressmen. They start to care. People want to protect this area. They established the refuge in 1980, but there's no fence around it. There's no protection. There's nothing. And in 1985, I remember this. Humphrey, the humpback whale shows up. And everyone goes to the Antioch Dunes as a viewing spot and trample the dunes.
And trample all the plants.
Exactly. So the social aspect of this, I think, is really fascinating. So they start doing counts of butterflies in 1986, 186 butterflies. In 1991, PG&E starts implementing some kind of restoration program by importing sand to try to recreate the habitat that was lost. But obviously, you're at the tail end of a lot of abuse.
How tall were the dunes? You said they were 800 feet tall?
No, 180. Sorry.
180.
I hope I didn't say 800. 180.
Oh, I had 800, yeah, okay.
So they start doing prescribed burning out there. Prescribed burns means you have to have fire breaks. So now you're separating the entire property into little mini parcels. Because if you're going to do a burn, you need to make sure that you can manage it and it doesn't creep over into other portions. So if you look at a map today, you'll see it's just crisscrossed with fire breaks. And those are both good and bad. I mean, there are open sands where new species can colonize, but they're also separating, creating voids in the habitat. 1999, they count 2,000.
What happened to have to be so big?
And the initial one was 120?
The one earlier was 186. I've got a map at the end that'll show, a graph that'll show the population. But you can see that 99 was a peak count. In 2013, you get 28 butterflies during the. So a peak count is the most number of butterflies seen at any one time, but they counted 78 butterflies total. So keep in mind these numbers mean different things. We're not saying there were only 28 butterflies. We're saying that the most number of butterflies that were counted at any one time is 28. So this is kind of a chart of the rise and fall of the butterfly out there. So 2014, 44 butterflies during the peak count.
And this is adult surveys, and
These
those
are-
are still the best method, or I guess it's.
Yeah. So what they do is they do transects, and you're just looking for the langs. They have a very trademark erratic flight that's like it's all over. And all the other butterflies are very purposeful in where they go. So a langs looks like it's drunk. And once you see it, you can identify them pretty easily. And if you guys want to participate, they do butterfly counts, and it's fun to go out there and learn the butterflies.
When
and
is that?
eat the langs.
When it's the
They
hottest
do it in
time
the
of
summer.
And
Okay.
who's,
Yeah.
Didn't they also do it earlier in the year?
AECOM or
What's that?
who puts
The
that
refuge
out?
does it.
They had a wallflower count, and they had a.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah.
No, it's the refuge itself.
Yeah.
The wildlife
Yeah.
fish and wildlife.
And
Oh,
it's,
okay.
if you guys want the contact, it's the same one as I sent out.
Susan Ewing.
Yeah, Susan Ewing for the counts for the wallflower and the primrose. She coordinates lens too, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's a really great, if you just send her a note and say, hey, I'm interested. And she's like, great.
I went to one for the wallflower.
Yeah. All right, so this is the Lang's middlemark butterfly. They have a flight season for about a month in late summer. They deposit their eggs on the stems of the buckwheat. They like the naked stem buckwheat. So they have erratic short distance. The flight pattern is erratic and short distances. They really don't fly very far at all. So that's one of the handicaps is that they can't leave the refuge and there's nowhere to go, right? There's no dune habitat where they can hop island to island and colonize a new spot. They're literally trapped there and there's no way to funnel them in a new direction. They really do look like they're drunk when they fly. That's not their forte.
What's the peak? You say late summer. What is typically the peak? I know it varies year to year. I'm talking August,
I think it's August, September, I think is when it counts out.
September. Okay.
Yeah. So the caterpillars, they emerge in the rainy season. They feed on the buckwheat leaves, the new shoots. And then the caterpillars go into a dormancy, and then they emerge again in the spring, and they feed a second time. Now they're eating the leaves and the flowers, and then they form a chrysalis. And then the butterflies emerge in the summer, and they deposit their eggs. So a lot of their life cycle is dependent on the buckwheat, and it's dependent on the lower quadrants of the buckwheat. So one of the problems you have out there is if you have invasive weeds that crowd the buckwheat, then you're going to get it traps moisture, and the moisture causes rot. So they don't do well if there's a lot of cover. And if you think about dune systems in general, and kind of like historic California, grasses and dune systems are like spotty, right? You've got the bunch grasses and dunes are erratic, and that's because you've got moving sands, and you get things like what is it? The
Beach grass?
no, what Caltrans plants, the succulent.
Ice
Hot fig, yeah. So that creates a carpet. It prevents the sands from moving, it traps moisture, and it takes away the dynamic system that dunes, that make dunes, right? Dunes shift, they move, they're active, and all these invasive species are just locking them all up.
Can I ask you really quickly? So they emerge on typical butterflies. They're laying eggs. Basically, day 1, day 2 emergence. The females. It sounds like do the eggs hang out on the stem for a little bit, and maybe they're triggered by rain to hatch, or is it? Do they go into like a first instar where they eat their egg capsule and then?
I don't know if they know a lot about this, but they're now doing a captive program where they're collecting certain adults and trying to collect the eggs and then rear the eggs, the caterpillars, and then they release them on the other end. They take the chrysali, and they'll hang them on buckwheat, tie them to a buckwheat, and hope that they'll hatch. And that's, I mean, I don't.
Sounds complicated.
It's very complicated. I don't know if it works. It doesn't not work. They're introducing butterflies back, but I don't know if they're. I mean, if you look at those numbers, I don't think they're not gaming the system. It's not working such that they're recovering the species. They're probably just helping it hold on.
She said that the count for the wallflower they got 35 was the most recent number that they counted. That they were looking at the butterflies as adults, like the nectar service that they were flying around the Sinistia that's there. They're trying to make sure there's more of that. They're actually having a hard time propagating it. So that's the ability to try more traditional horticulture from the Sinistia. That's sunflower family. So it's like they're trying really hard, but it's this puzzle. Which part of the puzzle and she said that the weeds definitely create this micro temperature difference at the base, and they had on Earth Day all these volunteers come and take the base plant them, but you don't want to knock the seeds off the stems. You don't want to hurt any of the larvae that are down at the base and the root there. It's just like this thing. This sounded really tough.
Yeah, what's additionally tough is that you've got Susan Ewing and Louis and like 1 or 2 other staff.
And no funding.
And no funding, so you've got 3 or 4 people that are working on nickels and dimes to recover an entire species on 55 acres, which involves vegetation management and preventing trespassing. And just imagine trying to control access and manage 55 acres, and that's just one of the properties that they have to oversee. So it's a lot of work. And they're dedicated people. They work really hard doing this, but they rely entirely on volunteers for the butterfly counts and the plant counts.
One funny anecdote is maybe people have heard about postage stamp reserves, meaning they're really tiny.
Literally.
Yeah, I think it was initially linked to this story where these were put on a postage stamp and shrunk down, and they were just as tiny as
Yeah.
We were also talking about that the site is now fenced off because people were coming and burning. There's a huge homeless issue. And the people there talk about when they were kids, they used to go there and have fun, and now they can't get there anymore, so they don't actually understand what the mechanisms are for taking care of the organisms there.
Right.
It's a tough thing publicly for them.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so, perfectly timed. Threats for the refuge. You have a lack of native plant diversity because you've got so many invasive plants. You have a lack of ecosystem function because you have non-natives there that are changing the way that the dune system works. The dune system isn't functioning, it just becomes static, which further handicaps the native plants that should be out there. You have habitat fragmentation. Not only is the refuge isolated, its two parcels are isolated from each other, and then there's no connectivity to any other sand system in the area, so habitat fragmentation. And then you've got the fire breaks, so it's like a 1, 2, 3 punch, right? There's then you have the loss of habitat, so you got encroachment or just degradation from the gypsum plant next door, which drops dust on the property. They don't know how the dust affects the butterfly or the caterpillars or their larvae, but there very well could be an effect with handicap pollination or nectaring on the native plants. And as a result of all of this, especially when you have 44 butterflies or even 124, even 2,000, you have decreased genetic diversity. And this goes for not only the butterfly, but any of the other native plants that are listed and non-listed. Decreased species populations and species diversity. So you've got potential for a genetic bottleneck of the property if it is the only other way. And then, so, non-native invasive weeds, fire breaks, burns, vegetative overcrowding, stabilized sands, trespassers. People will come in from the water. It's impossible to control that. They don't have video cameras or any way to prevent people from coming off the river. They can creep through and under the fence. People will jump the fence. Campfires, drink, smoke, start a fire. They've had several wildfires occur because of that. They have to go out and they lose certain stands of native plants that they're trying to protect. There's kind of that catch-22 of whether or not to use pesticides to control the non-natives, but also the effect of those pesticides on the native plants and the invertebrates. And then whether or not they use them, the neighbors use them, those really drift onto the property. So there's so much outside influence on this tiny parcel of land. And then we mentioned gypsum dust. All right, so another case study. Fish and Wildlife Service has asked you to come up with a restoration plan to help bring the dunes back. So we talked about all the threats to the dunes. If you had an open pocketbook, what kind of things could we do, perhaps, to restore the dunes? So they're doing that right now. I don't know if you know that. The Port of Stockton regularly dredges the river, and they've got sand. So they're looking for a way to dispose of that sand, and the refuge said, we'll take it.
Take it down to sand.
So if you look it up online, you'll see that they are bringing in boatloads of sand and just dumping it out there. And they're trying to create dune systems, artificially recreate what took hundreds of thousands of years to occur. Now those sands aren't going to be pure; they're going to have seed and organic matter in them, but it's certainly a start.
What about what Point Reyes was doing also with removing ice plant and trying to destabilize dunes through removing just invasives and stuff like that?
Yeah. So in this case, there is an ice plant here,
okay.
but a lot of the non-natives act similar to ice plant.
Yeah, they stabilize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the problems that you just mentioned is the fact that you can't just willy-nilly walk around out there because you could trample the buckwheat, you could trample the butterfly, the caterpillars, and the eggs. So it's very hard, especially when you're relying on volunteers to go out there and pull non-native vegetation. You're also counting on amateurs and the public to identify native and non-native plants. So it's a great idea,
Yeah.
and they do it, but there's a risk involved when you have people out there doing that.
It's interesting since it's not ice plant is a stabilization in coastal areas here. It's non-native annual grasses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff
Well,
we
no,
see.
they've got rooms in there.
Yeah, it's
A
the
lot
same.
of there's a batch that purple,
Yeah, who's that, John?
looks like it's fine.
Yeah, it's really similar to what we see in our grasslands, and you can see a soil starting to form. And this is the scary part of it, is that in some of those dunes you're starting to see humus layer and soil formation, which is typically a bad sign if you want to keep dunes regulated moving. Yeah. And it's a really interesting process. One of the things I know they pumped into there is, as you showed this here, and I know what this is getting at, is there are very many different types of sand. Sand is in not only different sizes, but although it's a microscopic particle, it's in different shapes.
Yeah.
Some sand sticks, and some sand moves. Wind-blown sand are these beautiful kind of curved, tiny grains. They're very light and move, and that allows that ecological process. There's nowhere for those to blow at. Like even if we had aeolian sand there, or wind-blown sand, there's very little area that sand can ever go because it's such a small. What's the total preserve?
55 acres.
55 acres.
It's divided into two pieces, so something.
So we could do non-native plant removal.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, but it could be done. So in this case, I can't remember which is which, but one of the parcels does not have the butterfly on it, so they can do a lot more management on that parcel than they can the other one. So they might be able to concentrate their efforts there. But at the same time, they don't know. It just vanished from that second parcel a few years ago, and they do counts out there every year. They haven't found them, and it could be any number of things.
So they
Remember, they're very
disappeared.
poor dispersers.
Yeah.
So even that little space, what is it? It's 2,000 feet between the parcels? Or is it a mile? I don't even think it's a full mile.
It's
But still, they're not good dispersers. They're what we call
yeah,
non-vagile butterflies. And even getting
You
across.
can see on that little left map over
Oh,
there.
this is
That's
two
better,
boxes?
yeah.
Those two boxes with.
the two boxes
Yeah.
are the
Yeah.
current refuge boundaries.
Well, then
What's
what's all
Start-
the
start to see
around
what
it?
this down.
So this is a composite of the historic conditions
Oh,
with the current boundaries of the current refuge. It doesn't show all of the development that's there now. But
so there's development in between?
that was an old quarry. That was an old quarry. That's a quarry.
Oh, yeah.
Is that still
That's the
quarry?
wharf. This is the railroad running here. This is the railroad spur going in there.
What's in between the two areas? There's one quarry in there?
I think this is the gypsum.
Yeah, that's a plant now.
Yeah.
It's a non. It's developed. It's not a dispersal habitat. It's not a vacant lot.
So they can't fly
Let's
over
build
that.
that there.
No, they're trapped.
So in total, it's 55 acres?
Yeah. The two
Mhm.
together.
Wow.
And there's a ton of coastline road in one of the patches that's
Yeah.
got deep.
So on the
deep-
Sardis
deep
unit
soil.
on the right, that one has got, they call it the pit, and the pit is filled with coast live oak woodland. It's gorgeous in there, and that's probably relictual dune and relictual. That one's more intact, and more representative of what the other dune system looked like. So the crummy picture I showed you is like standing here looking this way. This is a little more intact.
Even though it's smaller.
A little smaller, yeah.
And which one does the butterfly appear at? Still?
The butterfly is on the Sardis unit.
Oh, okay, so it's small.
They planted a lot of the maple stuff, locally that they just, I mean,
No, no.
In the Sardis unit?
yeah.
Okay.
Because fate is cruel, you put the butterfly on the smaller parcel, right?
I'm gonna bring up just an aerial real quick, just so you can see it here.
What's the range of a normal butterfly?
300 feet.
park at all.
No, I mean, if you look at the monarch, it's one of the widest dispersers. I mean, it has the longest migration pattern. Probably, I don't know if it beats certain whale species, but it's probably up there.
They don't make
The monarch.
They don't make the full migration
No,
in one
that's-
generation.
It's steps.
That's like 3 generations, right?
Yeah, so they go for that.
So there's some question about whether or not this is a truly a unique species, or it has become a unique species because it's become isolated. It's kind of a moot point because it is isolated now, and it's got federal protection, so it's treated as a unique species.
What is it related to? What's that? Is that
The hallmark was mentioned.
There's whatever the local Mormons.
Mormons.
Oh.
There you go. Oh no.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not at the end of the slideshow here real quick. It does this funny thing where it's
Just sticking together.
it sticks to the slideshow unless I stop it, and then it'll hop over. And then, I don't know what this is.
So out there, they also do a lot of dune disturbance just by digging around out there. You can, loosen up the soils, and by doing wallflower planting, destabilize the dunes and create new habitat. Like I said, the trails are kind of a mixed blessing. You'll see a lot of eating primrose growing in the trails because they're capitalizing on the open, bare sand. They like that. Those little few spots where the sand is barren. It's really hard to get the neighborhood to embrace this area because it's in an urban setting. So PG&E, probably because they see the money in having a good community outreach here, they do restoration. They could probably also donate the land that they own and not lose much in the process, but they haven't done that. Yeah, so
you can see this is certainly
That's a big factor.
a dispersal
Yeah.
obstruction. Yeah, this is that big plant that's blowing, depending on the prevailing winds, right? And here you can see some of that oak woodland.
so this
And
is
that's where they're at.
this is the pit right here. So when you come in, you drive down this road, and it takes you into a big low spot here.
And you usually can't go in there
No,
without.
it's closed, you have to go,
Yeah, they're all fenced. And then over here, you can.
there's 1 hour. of
So
like
that's
that.
where the butterflies are? It's where the oak?
Yeah, the butterfly is on the Sardis unit. This is the stem unit over here, and there's no butterflies here. So
So
the
the
bigger
buck,
parcel is absent of butterfly.
so I mean, does the buckwheat,
There's buckwheat on both
Grow.
parcels.
does it want to grow in certain areas? Like,
There's buckwheat on both properties.
okay.
It's just that for whatever reason, the butterfly has disappeared off of this westerly unit.
Have you looked at the typical wind blow pattern to see if there are good things going on? Big parcel?
Oddly enough, I'm pretty sure that when the wind blows
Yeah.
eastward,
It seemed
and
like there was
all
a lot, we were on that site.
it settles all over.
A lot there, so we
Yeah.
looked at it.
But it depends on the outdoor winds and you get the variable conditions seasonally. So, this is a huge wind tunnel, and that's part of the reason why we do that.
So the dune restoration they're doing right now, they're importing sand and trying to create sand dunes here. These are all the fire breaks and the trail. I mean, the fire breaks double as the trails. But you can see they're trying to parcel out the property so they can protect it if there's a wildfire. These are the historic dunes that I had in the history part where PG paid to have some sand imported. I mean, there's little pumps in the ground. I don't think they actually function because this ecosystem is handicapped. We got really cool oak woodland here that must have been saplings when they were cutting cordwood, so they just ignored that as a picture. And then you've got, a nice shoreline here, where this is where some of the Delta tunicate and a few other listed species can be found here. Really options. This is also where people pull in and they find the bluffs and they access the property where no one can see them. They build a little campfire and hopefully it doesn't spread.
Yeah, it's heavy industrial area.
Yeah. That was it. The last picture was just like happy, giddy picture.
So what would your, if you were, what is your take on it? Practice
I mean, I think they're doing what they can. It's money and time and volunteers. It's education. It's outreach. In this case, they can't do everything alone because they have like a staff of 2 or 3. So I donate my time every year if I can to go out and do butterfly counts. I mean, if you're into it, one species that I didn't cover here, the silvery legless lizard, is a very unique lizard that lives in sandy habitats, and it follows that sandy belt all the way down to San Joaquin, to the Mojave Desert, and they can be found out here. So if you go out and do dune restoration, if you're planting, you're very likely to find them. They're really cool.
What are they called?
It's a silvery legless lizard. They're about the length of a pencil. They are liquid silver on top, and they're lemon yellow on the bottom. And they just burrow into the sand. And if you're digging around, you can turn them up, and they're really fun to look at. Another species that used to be out there that hasn't been seen in 20, 30 years is the horned lizard. Horny toad, some people call them. So one by one, these native species are dropping. Oh yeah, there you go. As the ecosystem begins to fail, certain species don't do so well. So horned lizards rely on ants to forage on, and the native ant population is probably collapsed out there. So
Yeah, it's interesting, and ants actually play a large part in butterfly protection of butterflies that are in larval form. A lot of pupa or larvae are actually secrete honeydew, and then they have ants associated with them that actually protect them. And that's known for the mission blue that we work with in San Francisco. Interestingly, with the mission blue and the habitat we're dealing with in San Francisco and working to restore is probably in total about the same size and even smaller. And it just requires a lot of time, a lot of money. And I think the key thing about this system, as I look at that map and think about it, is having that habitat heterogeneity, being able to disturb, experiment, and play with one part, while another part serves as refugia for your target species. And that's something that happened out here historically, right? Just because the wind blew, it didn't move all the dunes. It moved the 4 dunes. And then different winds would come in and they might reshape the back dunes, allow for different colonization of vegetation. And I think that's what's really missing here, and that's the hard thing about this. This site is very handcuffed because it's fish and wildlife.
How so? What does that mean? Say it a different way.
Yeah, so going back to what Tanner was saying yesterday, regulatory wise, you're going to have a hard time getting fish and wildlife biologists like Ryan Olaf and really great butterfly folks, David Kelly, to get excited about perturbing this habitat too much, because it's all we got. This is the one.
The risk seems so high.
This is the one station for an endangered butterfly that's plummeted.
But they are disturbing the parcel on the left that doesn't have a butterfly anymore. They are dredging all that sand.
because it doesn't have a
and
butterfly.
Because
they pulling out weeds there because the butterfly's not there, so they are disturbing that parcel.
right, but then the question is, in my perspective, and what I've done with butterflies, I've worked with the Bay Checker Spot and Mission Blue, is that we need to start figuring out a translocation program. We need to start, and I don't know how much they've done this, but think about what it would look like to move larvae from Stan to Sardis. And we've had some success with translocations. That's why the Mission Blue is on Twin Peaks, because we augmented the population there. That's why the Bay Checker Spot is now on San Bruno Mountain. That was reintroduced just this year after being absent for 35 years. But we need to be able to play with that. For one to comfortably play with that, you probably need more than 143 adults. So my first thought is you really got to get STAM being more productive. I don't want to see, I want to get back into thousands there. The interesting thing about insect populations, they go through boom and bust. You got to wait out the busts and be ready on the boom. When you get that boom year and you get those 2,000 individuals, and hopefully this will go through that pattern again, that's when you got your permits ready, you got your plan ready, and you're doing it. Because if you figure it out 3 months into the boom year and you got 2 months left, it's just not going to happen. So kind of preparing for that and knowing how these insect populations go. We see that with the bay checker spot. The first 8 years I worked on the butterfly, we saw ones and zeros per 10-minute survey period. We do larval surveys for it.
Is that something Green Mountain?
No, this was at Coyote Ridge.
Okay.
Just trying to give you a quick idea of the density. One larva per 10 minutes, maybe 2 per 10 minutes. On the boom years, when the 2-3 boom years that I've seen there, we got numbers upwards of 500. We're stepping on that. And it's these boom busts, and so it's like, all right, the iron is hot, strike, collect, translocate, help them out on this process, which they probably naturally would go through if their habitat was more connected. But I think waiting for that moment is so scary, right? I mean, if they're seeing 44
And then if you want to pull certain individuals out of the population or you're in captivity, you're now, I mean, that's in your hands now, right? It's not nature doing its thing. You're responsible for whether or not those eggs with a chrysalide hatch.
Yeah.
You successfully breed the butterfly.
It's just, I think of like what happened at the Academy of Science when they opened up their rainforest dome for the first time after renovating the building. I don't know if you saw. Well, I mean, it was just like it was the Academy of Science. They renovated everything. They made the whole building new.
Okay.
Yeah, and they created this rainforest dome with all of these butterflies in it, and there used to be like lines every month around the block, like all the way to Hippie Hill on a free day. So you get just people constantly in this dome. I mean, I'm sure that affected it, but month by month you would go in there and you just see dead butterflies. Like, I mean, they're all exotic butterflies, but their butterfly situation did not work out in the Academy of Science.
Was that for the community or for carbon dioxide or for some other aspect of it?
I mean, I honestly don't know. I would imagine there were so many people visiting when it first opened.
Generating engine place. It's the gate right. That is.
And there, I mean, it was just, it just seemed like such an unnatural situation for the butterflies, really. But it's not, there aren't so many butterflies there anymore.
But if you helped to reduce the scatter spots to Edgewood at all, because I was there on Saturday at Edgewood with some of the Santa Clara chapter people, and they were saying that they've had, I think, at least 3 introductions, but they haven't really been able to figure out if they've been successful at all.
Yeah, quick story on that, and if people need to go, I fully understand. The bay checker spot has been reintroduced to 3 locations right now. I was part of all 3 of them through Creekside Science, the firm I used to work for. One is a small place called Tulare Hill. It is in Santa Clara Valley. It is just across the way from Coyote Ridge, very similar climate. Basically, the butterfly was formerly seen there. It's about a mile away from the large, what we call core population. What happened there is they stopped grazing, and the host plant, which is Plantago erecta, which grows to be about this big, winked out. They did some grazing out there. They recreated the habitat and moved the checker spot out there. That was successful. Edgewood is a second site farther up the peninsula by Jasper Ridge, another former checker spot site. That is a site, very unique floral site, Edgewood Natural Preserve. Unfortunately, with that site, the amount of acreage that now is what we believe good for bay checker spot habitat is pushing maybe 10 acres,
Oh, wow, that's all, huh?
and it's flat.
Mm-hmm.
What makes bay checker spots work, and I know you probably know this story too, is what we call topographic heterogeneity.
Mm-hmm.
On a hot year, they need to have refugia on cooler slopes. On a cold year, we need larvae to be on the hot side so they can develop. They're little solar collectors. They're all black. They need energy, they need the sun, and they need that variability. If they're in a completely flat site where that habitat is at Edgewood, because the uplands that have it, topographic heterogeneity, are scrub dominated and woodland dominated. Those flat areas, they get too wet of a year, too dry of a year. They're much more susceptible to changes in annual variability in climate. And so Edgewood is a tough one for us, and Stu would have, who's a PhD scientist and has done remarkable work on this critter, has a certain thought on this. And it's tricky because, and Matthew brought this up, which I thought was an interesting point. He said, well, the metalmark's not a good flyer. It's interesting, the checker spot is actually really a fairly poor flyer too, historically, because it's on these serpentine lenses. But when we grab it from Coyote Ridge, a site that's a long serpentine ridge of 2,000 acres, there's probably some selection for better flyers. Why? Because it doesn't matter. They can still cruise around. So there's no selection pressure on the what we call vigility, or ability to disperse. So when we collect from there, we're thinking half the population's probably highly vagil, half the individuals are low vigility. Those are the ones more suited for Edgewood. We don't want them to go anywhere from Edgewood because there's not much around. And so we want the poor flyers. We want the lanes to stay there. But we're trying to select there. We're really excited about San Bruno Mountain. A lot of topographic heterogeneity, big habitat, places to disperse. We'll see. This is year one. This is the first images of an adult checker spot have been captured on San Bruno Mountain since the 70s.
Well, that's great.
It's
Yeah.
fairly significant. The only problem is we moved them as high instar larvae, 6th, 7th star instar larvae, so they're most of the way up. What we really want to see is eggs in that following year. And you gotta wait that 12 months to see what happens, right?
So they're introduced this year, you're saying?
What's that?
This year they're introduced to San Bruno?
You got it.
Okay.
Just happened.
2017.
Don't
Wow.
step on them.
Don't step on it. Great.
Okay. Folks, I want to say thank you to Matthew.
Thank
This is
you
the first
very
case
much.
studies. I love them.
Thank you guys for making it interactive. That was fun. Good questions.
Do you have any business cards, or can I send out your
I
contact?
do if you, yeah.
If anybody wants a business card or contact, go chase Western pond turtles.
Yeah. Additional pond turtle questions?
I'll have to start looking in ponds now.
Yeah, you do. Mission accomplished.
Isn't AECOM merging with another consultancy?
It has happened. AECOM bought out URS.
Okay.
So I used to work for URS.
Oh, okay.
I now work for AECOM. You guys want a business
Oh,
card?
so that was recent.
Is AECOM a really, is that a
2
big
years
company?
ago. It's
Oh, okay. I feel like
formalized
maybe
now.
I'm thinking of Arcadis or something, but
There's a lot of
like there's supposed to be like another merger or something. I heard.
someone's always beating up
Right.
somebody else, right? That's how it works.
You have offices in Southern California too, right?
Yeah, we have
Really?
offices. We're
Yeah.
international. We are
Oh,
the
internet.
Borg.
We are the board. We are.
I don't say that proudly. That's just the way.
80,000.
The
Is that the
big
number
end.
of employees?
I think it's down to 70,000.
70,000
Oh, wow.
worldwide. It's a small company.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you.
You too. Yeah. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my friend works down in LA with AECOM.
Oh, yeah?
I did a piece of work on it.